Have you ever wondered why Family Guy has become the internet's unofficial lullaby? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, chaotic, and surprisingly comforting world of Quahog, Rhode Island, where nothing makes sense, and somehow that's exactly what our brains need to drift off to sleep. From Peter's ridiculous schemes to Stewie's world domination plots, we'll explore every corner of the Griffin family universe that has helped millions fall asleep over the past 2 decades. But first, let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually paid attention to a Family Guy episode from start to finish? If you're like most people, you probably can't remember, because this show has transcended traditional viewing. It's become background noise, comfort food for your ears, a familiar chaos that somehow brings peace to restless minds across the globe. The phenomenon of falling asleep to Family Guy isn't just coincidence. There's actually a psychological explanation for why this particular animated sitcom has become the go-to choice for nighttime viewing. The show operates on what I call controlled chaos. While the plots are completely unpredictable and often nonsensical, the characters remain consistent in their absurdity. Your brain recognizes the patterns even when the content is random, creating a perfect storm of familiarity and unpredictability that helps quiet anxious thoughts. Let's start our journey through Family Guy lore with the patriarch himself, Peter Griffin. This beer-loving, chicken-fighting, scheme-hatching father has been the center of countless storylines that range from mildly ridiculous to absolutely insane. Peter's character represents the everyman taken to impossible extremes. He works at a brewery, loves television, struggles with his weight, and has an adversarial relationship with his teenage daughter. These are relatable elements wrapped in layers of cartoon absurdity. One of the most enduring aspects of Peter's character is his ongoing feud with Ernie the Giant Chicken. This rivalry began over an expired coupon and has escalated into epic battle sequences that destroy entire city blocks. The chicken fights serve as a perfect metaphor for how Family Guy operates. What starts as something mundane and everyday transforms into spectacular chaos, yet viewers accept it as normal within the show's universe. Peter's job history alone could fill hours of content. He's worked at the Happy-Go-Lucky Toy Factory, tried his hand at various entrepreneurial ventures, and somehow always ends up back at the Pawtucket Brewery. His work relationships, particularly with his friends Cleveland, Joe, and Quagmire, form the backbone of many episodes. These friendships represent a kind of arrested development, where grown men engage in childish activities and conversations, creating a comfort zone that many viewers find soothing. Speaking of Peter's friends, each one represents a different aspect of suburban male friendship taken to cartoon extremes. Cleveland Brown, before moving to his own spin-off show, was the voice of reason in the group, though his definition of reasonable was still pretty skewed. Joe Swanson brings physical comedy through his wheelchair-bound police officer character, often engaging in activities that would be impossible for someone with his disability, which the show treats as completely normal. Then, there's Glenn Quagmire, the pilot with an insatiable appetite for romantic encounters. Quagmire's character serves as the show's id, expressing desires and behaviors that are completely inappropriate, but delivered in such an over-the-top manner that they become cartoon villainy rather than realistic threats. His famous giggity giggity catchphrase has become part of internet culture, often used ironically to reference something vaguely suggestive. The Griffin household itself is a character in the show. This typical suburban home has been destroyed and rebuilt countless times, serving as the stage for domestic chaos that somehow always resets to normal by the next episode. The living room, with its familiar brown couch and television, has become an iconic setting that viewers associate with comfort and routine. Lois Griffin represents the long-suffering wife archetype, but with layers of complexity that unfold over multiple seasons. Her wealthy background, her brief career as a model, and her occasional outbursts of violence create a character who's both nurturing and dangerous. Lois serves as the family's moral center, though her morality is often compromised by the show's need for comedy. Her relationship with Peter showcases a marriage that defies all logic, yet somehow works within the show's universe. The Griffin children each represent different aspects of growing up in modern America, filtered through the show's twisted lens. Meg Griffin, the teenage daughter, exists primarily as the family's punching bag. Her character represents every awkward teenager's worst fears amplified to ridiculous proportions. The family's treatment of Meg borders on cruel, yet it's presented in such an exaggerated manner that it becomes absurdist comedy rather than realistic family dysfunction. Chris Griffin, the teenage son, embodies adolescent confusion and hormones. His character often serves as Peter's mini-me, inheriting his father's capacity for poor decision-making while maintaining a certain innocent charm. Chris's storylines often explore themes of identity, attraction, and the awkwardness of growing up, but always through the show's comedic filter. But perhaps no character has captured audiences' imagination quite like Stewie Griffin, the infant with the British accent and dreams of world domination. Stewie represents pure ambition, untempered by experience or wisdom. His elaborate schemes for taking over the world, or eliminating his mother, provide endless entertainment, while also serving as commentary on human nature's darker impulses. Stewie's relationship with Brian the dog creates some of the show's most compelling storylines. Their friendship transcends species and age, representing an idealized relationship between two intelligent beings who understand each other completely. Brian serves as Stewie's confidant, partner in crime, and occasionally his voice of reason, though Brian's own flaws often make him an unreliable moral guide. Brian Griffin deserves special attention as perhaps the most complex character in the Family Guy universe. As an anthropomorphic dog who walks upright, drives a car, and engages in adult relationships, Brian represents the show's complete abandonment of logical consistency. He's a failed novelist, a liberal activist, and an alcoholic, creating a character who embodies both aspiration and failure. The show's use of cutaway gags has become its signature storytelling device. These random flashbacks, fantasy sequences, and non-sequitur moments serve multiple purposes. They allow the writers to explore any topic or reference any piece of pop culture without worrying about narrative consistency. For viewers trying to fall asleep, these cutaways create a dreamlike quality where anything can happen, and often does. Family Guy's relationship with pop culture is both parasitic and symbiotic. The show references everything from obscure television commercials to major historical events, creating a shared cultural experience for viewers. These references serve as comfort food for the brain, triggering recognition and nostalgia even when the context is completely absurd. The show's treatment of time and continuity is particularly noteworthy for sleep viewing. Characters can die and return to life, major life changes can be reversed without explanation, and the family's economic situation fluctuates wildly from episode to episode. This lack of consequences creates a consequence-free environment, where viewers don't need to worry about long-term character development or ongoing plot threads. Seth MacFarlane's voice work deserves recognition for contributing to the show's sleep-friendly qualities. His performance as multiple characters creates a consistent vocal landscape that becomes familiar and comforting over time. The way he delivers Peter's lines, Stewie's sophisticated vocabulary, and Brian's neurotic observations creates distinct character voices while maintaining an underlying consistency that helps viewers relax. The show's approach to controversial topics through cartoon abstraction makes it perfect for background viewing. Serious subjects are processed through layers of absurdity until they become manageable, non-threatening content. This filtering effect allows viewers to engage with complex themes without the emotional weight that might keep them awake. Family Guy's musical elements also contribute to its sleep-friendly nature. From Conway Twitty performances to original songs like Surfin' Bird, the show incorporates music in unexpected ways that create variety within familiarity. These musical interludes serve as natural breakpoints in the narrative flow, creating rhythmic patterns that complement the relaxation process. The show's animation style strikes a perfect balance between detailed enough to be interesting and simple enough to not be overstimulating. The character designs are iconic yet basic, allowing viewers to recognize what's happening without needing to focus intently on visual details. This visual simplicity makes it ideal for peripheral viewing as you drift off to sleep. Supporting characters like Herbert the elderly neighbor, the evil monkey in Chris's closet, and Death himself create a rich universe that extends beyond the Griffin family. These recurring characters provide continuity and familiarity, while also serving as sources of unexpected humor and comfort. The show's handling of social issues through satirical exaggeration creates a safe space for processing real-world anxieties. By taking serious topics and pushing them to absurd extremes, Family Guy allows viewers to engage with difficult subjects in a non-threatening way. This processing can actually be therapeutic for people trying to quiet their minds before sleep. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. Memes, reaction GIFs, and quotable moments from the show have become part of online communication. This cultural penetration means that falling asleep to Family Guy connects viewers to a broader community experience, creating a sense of shared comfort and belonging. The show's production history includes periods of cancellation and revival, creating a mythology around its own existence. Fans who supported its return feel a personal investment in its success, making the viewing experience more emotionally satisfying. This investment translates into comfort when using the show as sleep aid, as viewers feel they're supporting something they helped save. As we wrap up our journey through Family Guy lore, it's worth considering why this particular show has achieved such a unique cultural position. In a world full of stress, uncertainty, and serious problems, Family Guy offers a space where nothing has permanent consequences, where the absurd is normal, and where even the worst situations somehow work out in the end. The show's genius lies not in its individual jokes or storylines, but in its creation of a universe where chaos and comfort coexist. For millions of viewers, the Griffin family's problems make their own seem manageable, while the show's predictable unpredictability provides just enough mental stimulation to quiet anxious thoughts without preventing sleep. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who's discovered the show through its reputation as internet comfort food, Family Guy continues to serve as a bridge between consciousness and sleep, a familiar voice in the darkness that reminds us that tomorrow, like every Family Guy episode, is a fresh start, where anything is possible and nothing really matters. Sweet dreams, and remember, we all live in Quahog in our hearts, where the beer is cold, the chicken fights are epic, and Peter Griffin's laugh echoes through eternity. Have you ever found yourself lying in bed, scrolling through endless videos, desperately searching for something that will help you drift off to sleep? Tonight, I'm going to take you on the most relaxing journey through the bizarre and comforting world of Family Guy lore. From the show's humble beginnings to its most obscure character backstories, we'll explore everything at a gentle pace that's perfect for winding down. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let's dive into the surprisingly deep mythology of America's most chaotic animated family. Picture this scene from 1998. A young animator named Seth MacFarlane sits in his tiny apartment, sketching what would become one of television's most enduring families. The Griffin household wasn't born from a single moment of inspiration, but rather from years of MacFarlane's observations about American family dynamics, mixed with his love for classic comedy and animation. What started as a simple cartoon about a dysfunctional family would evolve into something much more complex and layered than anyone could have imagined. The Griffin family home itself tells a story that spans decades. Located at 31 Spooner Street in the fictional town of Quahog, Rhode Island, this house has witnessed countless adventures, disasters, and heartwarming moments. The architecture reflects a typical New England colonial style, but if you look closely at the show's evolution, you'll notice subtle changes over the years. The living room layout has shifted, rooms have appeared and disappeared, and the overall color palette has grown warmer and more inviting as the series matured. Let's start our journey with Peter Griffin, the family patriarch whose childlike wonder and complete lack of filter have driven countless storylines. Peter's background is far more intricate than his simple exterior suggests. Born to an Irish Catholic family, Peter discovered in his adult years that his biological father was actually Mickey McFinnigan, an Irish immigrant who had a brief relationship with his mother. This revelation came during one of the show's more emotionally resonant episodes, adding unexpected depth to Peter's character. Peter's employment history reads like a comedy of errors, but each job has contributed to the show's rich tapestry of recurring characters and locations. His most stable position at the Pawtucket Patriot Brewery introduced us to characters like Angela, Carl, and Joe Swanson. The brewery itself serves as more than just a workplace in the show's mythology. It represents Peter's connection to his blue-collar roots and provides a setting for some of the series' most memorable workplace comedy moments. The relationship between Peter and his wife Lois forms the emotional core of many episodes. Lois Pewterschmidt Griffin comes from wealth and privilege. Having grown up in the affluent Pewterschmidt family, her father Carter represents old money and conservative values, while her mother Barbara provides a more nurturing presence. This class divide between Peter and Lois creates ongoing tension and comedy throughout the series, but it also grounds their relationship in something recognizably real. Lois's musical background adds another layer to her character that often gets overlooked. Her piano skills and brief stint as a lounge singer reveal artistic aspirations that were set aside for family life. These talents emerge periodically throughout the series, reminding us that Lois is more than just the family's voice of reason. Her complex relationship with her own identity, caught between her privileged upbringing and her current middle-class life, provides subtle character development that rewards longtime viewers. Moving to the next generation, Meg Griffin represents perhaps the show's most tragic figure. The eldest Griffin child serves as the family's perpetual scapegoat, but her character development over the years reveals someone far more resilient and complex than her treatment suggests. Meg's academic achievements, her various romantic relationships, and her occasional moments of standing up for herself paint a picture of a young woman struggling to find her place in both her family and the world at large. The running gag of Meg being ignored or mistreated by her family actually serves a deeper narrative purpose. It reflects real family dynamics where one member becomes the target for everyone else's frustrations and insecurities. While played for comedy, Meg's situation often touches on genuine issues of family dysfunction and teenage alienation that many viewers recognize from their own experiences. Chris Griffin, the middle child, embodies adolescent awkwardness with surprising authenticity. His artistic talents, particularly his drawing abilities, provide glimpses into a creative soul trapped in an uncomfortable body. Chris's relationship with his father Peter oscillates between moments of genuine connection and complete misunderstanding. These dynamics reflect the complexity of father-son relationships during the teenage years, when both parties are struggling to communicate across generational and emotional barriers. The youngest Griffin, Stewie, presents the show's most fascinating character study. Initially conceived as a one-dimensional villain bent on world domination and matricide, Stewie has evolved into something far more nuanced. His genius-level intellect, time travel capabilities, and sophisticated vocabulary create endless storytelling possibilities. But beneath the surface, Stewie's character explores themes of identity, sexuality, and the struggle between intellectual superiority and emotional immaturity. Stewie's relationship with the family dog Brian forms one of the series' most enduring friendships. Their adventures together, from time travel escapades to simple conversations in the Griffin living room, showcase a bond that transcends species and age. Brian, as the family's intellectual and moral center, often serves as Stewie's guide to understanding human emotions and relationships. Brian Griffin's own backstory adds depth to what could have been a simple talking dog character. His struggles with alcoholism, his failed writing career, and his complicated romantic relationships make him surprisingly relatable, despite his canine nature. Brian's liberal political views and intellectual pretensions often clash with the Griffin family's more straightforward approach to life, creating tension that drives many storylines. The supporting characters in Family Guy's universe each bring their own rich histories and ongoing storylines. Cleveland Brown, before his departure to star in his own spin-off series, represented loyalty and friendship in Peter's life. His patient tolerance of Peter's schemes and his own quiet dignity provided a stabilizing influence on the group dynamic. Even after his return to the main series, Cleveland's character maintains this role while showing growth and change from his experiences. Quagmire's character presents one of the show's most controversial yet compelling figures. His extreme libertine lifestyle and catchphrase delivery mask a more complex personality that occasionally emerges in episodes focusing on his background. His military service, his relationship with his parents, and his rare moments of vulnerability reveal someone using humor and bravado to cope with deeper psychological issues. Joe Swanson's paralysis could have been handled as simple disabled character representation, but the show has consistently portrayed him as a complete person whose disability is just one aspect of his identity. His career in law enforcement, his marriage to Bonnie, and his fierce determination to live life fully make him an inspiring presence in the show's ensemble cast. Joe's friendship with Peter and the other neighbors demonstrates how genuine relationships transcend physical limitations. The town of Quahog itself functions almost as another character in the series. From the drunken clam bar where Peter and his friends gather, to the various shops and locations that appear throughout the series, Quahog feels like a lived-in community with its own personality and rhythm. The recurring businesses and landmarks create a sense of continuity and familiarity that grounds the show's more outlandish storylines in something recognizable. The Drunken Clam deserves special attention as the series' most important recurring location outside the Griffin home. This working-class bar serves as Peter's refuge from domestic responsibilities and the setting for countless conversations between the main male characters. The bar's atmosphere, with its dim lighting and worn furniture, perfectly captures the feeling of a neighborhood establishment where everyone knows everyone else's business. Family Guy's approach to continuity creates an interesting paradox. While the show often resets situations for comedic purposes, certain character developments and relationships maintain consistency across episodes and seasons. This selective continuity allows the writers to explore serious themes while maintaining the show's comedic flexibility. Death episodes are mourned, relationships evolve, and characters grow older, but the core dynamic remains stable enough to support the show's humor. The series' numerous pop culture references and cutaway gags serve more than just comedic purposes. They create a shared cultural vocabulary that connects different episodes and seasons. Regular viewers begin to recognize patterns and callbacks that reward their loyalty and attention. These references also anchor the show in specific time periods, creating a kind of cultural archaeology that future viewers can explore. The show's handling of controversial topics demonstrates a willingness to tackle difficult subjects while maintaining its comedic identity. Episodes dealing with death, disability, sexuality, and family trauma show surprising emotional depth when they choose to engage seriously with these themes. This balance between comedy and genuine emotion gives the series more staying power than pure parody or shock comedy alone could provide. Music plays a crucial role in Family Guy's storytelling. From Conway Twitty performances that frustrate viewers to elaborate musical numbers that showcase the voice cast's talents. These musical interludes serve as palate cleansers between intense storylines and provide opportunities for character development through song. The show's musical choices, whether original compositions or classic covers, contribute to its overall emotional landscape. The Griffin family's relationships with their extended family members add additional layers to the show's mythology. Lois's wealthy parents, Peter's adoptive and biological fathers, and the various relatives who appear throughout the series create a broader family tree that influences character motivations and storylines. These relationships often drive holiday episodes and special occasions that bring out different aspects of the main characters. As we wind down this exploration of Family Guy's rich universe, it's worth noting how the show has maintained its relevance across multiple decades. The characters have aged and evolved while retaining their essential characteristics. New viewers can jump in at almost any point, while longtime fans are rewarded with deep continuity and character development that spans hundreds of episodes. The comfort that many people find in rewatching Family Guy episodes comes from this familiarity with the characters and their world. Like visiting old friends, spending time with the Griffin family provides a sense of continuity and connection that can be especially soothing during stressful times. The show's blend of absurd comedy and genuine emotion creates a unique viewing experience that can be both engaging and relaxing. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can rest easy, knowing that somewhere in the animated universe, the Griffin family continues their chaotic but loving existence at 31 Spooner Street. Peter is probably hatching another ill-conceived scheme. Lois is maintaining her patient dignity. Meg is persevering through another day of family dysfunction. Chris is discovering something new about himself. Stewie is plotting something elaborate, and Brian is providing wise commentary on it all. In Quahog, Rhode Island, life goes on with all its complications, humor, and unexpected moments of genuine heart. Sweet dreams, and remember that sometimes the most comforting stories are the ones about families who, despite all their flaws and chaos, somehow manage to stick together through everything life throws their way. Have you ever fallen asleep to the chaotic sounds of Peter Griffin crashing through a wall or Stewie plotting world domination? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, twisted, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy lore that's somehow become the perfect background noise for millions of viewers worldwide. From the hidden connections between episodes that span decades to the dark secrets lurking beneath Quahog's surface, this is your ultimate guide to the Family Guy universe that will either help you drift off to dreamland or keep you wide awake, questioning everything you thought you knew about America's most dysfunctional animated family. Family Guy has been on our screens for over 2 decades now, and what started as a simple animated sitcom has evolved into something far more complex and layered than most people realize. Tonight we're going to explore the deep lore, the recurring mysteries, the character backstories that only dedicated fans know about, and all the subtle details that make this show a fascinating rabbit hole to fall down as you're trying to fall asleep. Let's start with the Griffin family themselves, because there's so much more to these characters than meets the eye. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling father figure. His backstory reveals a man shaped by abandonment, neglect, and a desperate need for acceptance that manifests in increasingly destructive ways. We learn throughout the series that Peter was adopted, never knowing his real father until much later in the show's run. This abandonment issue explains so much about his behavior, his need to be the center of attention, and his often childlike approach to solving problems. But here's where it gets interesting for our sleepy exploration. Peter's job history reads like a fever dream. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, worked at a brewery, become a bodyguard, tried his hand at being a country music star, worked as a private investigator, and somehow ended up back at the brewery multiple times. Each job change represents a different phase of the show's evolution, and if you're watching chronologically as you fall asleep, you can actually track the show's tonal shifts through Peter's career moves. Lois Griffin presents an even more fascinating character study for our nighttime viewing. She comes from the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, which immediately sets up this class conflict that runs throughout the entire series. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, represents old money, conservative values, and everything that Peter both despises and desperately wants to be accepted by. Lois chose Peter over her privileged background, but this choice haunts their relationship in subtle ways that become more apparent when you're watching with sleepy, unfocused attention. The really interesting lore element here is how Lois's musical background keeps surfacing throughout the series. She's classically trained, she's performed professionally, and there are hints that she gave up a potentially successful career to become a housewife and mother. These musical moments in the show often serve as brief respites from the chaos, making them perfect for viewers who are using the show to wind down. Now let's talk about Meg, because her character arc is actually one of the most complex and disturbing elements of the Family Guy universe. What starts as typical teenage awkwardness evolves into something much darker. The family's treatment of Meg goes beyond normal sibling rivalry or parental frustration. It becomes a systematic emotional abuse that the show initially played for laughs, but gradually reveals as genuinely harmful. The lore around Meg includes several episodes that suggest she's actually the most mentally stable and capable member of the family, which makes her treatment even more tragic. She's shown to be intelligent, talented, and capable of genuine empathy, qualities that the rest of the family either ignores or actively punishes. For viewers drifting off to sleep, Meg's storylines often provide a strange sort of comfort because they're usually quieter and more introspective than the main family chaos. Chris Griffin's character development follows a different trajectory entirely. While he's often dismissed as the dumb kid, the show's lore reveals that Chris has artistic talent, musical ability, and emotional intelligence that surpasses most of his family members. His relationship with his father is complicated by Peter's own insecurities about masculinity and success. Chris represents the possibility of breaking the cycle of dysfunction, which gives his character an underlying hopefulness that works well for bedtime viewing. But let's dive into the real star of Family Guy's complex lore, Stewie Griffin. This character has undergone one of the most dramatic evolutionary arcs in television history. He started as a genuinely evil baby bent on world domination and matricide, but gradually transformed into a complex character dealing with identity, sexuality, and belonging. The show never explicitly addresses this transformation, which creates this fascinating ambiguity about whether Stewie actually changed or whether we're just seeing different aspects of his personality. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie create some of the most intricate lore in the entire series. His future selves, his various timelines, and his technological capabilities suggest a level of intelligence and capability that extends far beyond what we see in regular episodes. These time travel storylines often involve quieter, more contemplative moments that are perfect for viewers who are trying to relax. Stewie's relationship with Brian creates another layer of lore that's perfect for our sleepy exploration. Their friendship transcends the typical pet-owner relationship and becomes something closer to intellectual partnership. They travel together, solve problems together, and engage in philosophical discussions that often serve as the show's more thoughtful moments. Their dynamic provides a consistent emotional anchor throughout the series' more chaotic elements. Speaking of Brian, his character lore is incredibly rich and often overlooked. He's not just a talking dog. He's a failed writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and someone struggling with depression and self-worth issues. His various romantic relationships throughout the series reveal someone desperately seeking validation and connection. His death and resurrection in later seasons created one of the most emotionally impactful storylines in the show's history, demonstrating how attached viewers had become to his character. The setting of Quahog itself deserves exploration in our lore deep dive. This fictional Rhode Island town has its own mythology, complete with local celebrities, recurring businesses, and a distinct culture. The Drunken Clam serves as a central gathering place where much of the show's male bonding and philosophical discussions occur. Mort Goldman's pharmacy, the local news station, and various other businesses create a sense of continuity and community that grounds the more absurd elements of the show. Cleveland's departure and return to the series creates interesting lore implications. His time in Virginia with his own spin-off show exists in the same universe, and references to his experiences there occasionally surface in Family Guy episodes. This interconnected universe concept adds depth for viewers who are familiar with both shows. Quagmire's character provides some of the darkest lore in the entire series. While often played for laughs, his behavior patterns suggest serious psychological issues and criminal tendencies. The show occasionally hints at a more complex backstory involving his father's gender transition, his military service, and his dysfunctional relationship patterns. These darker elements create an interesting contrast with his seemingly cheerful demeanor. Joe Swanson's backstory as a disabled police officer adds another layer of complexity to the Quahog community. His accident, his marriage to Bonnie, and his struggle to maintain his sense of purpose and masculinity after becoming paralyzed provide some of the show's more serious emotional content. His friendship with Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire often explores themes of loyalty, acceptance, and adaptation that work well for contemplative viewing. The show's cutaway gags, while seemingly random, actually create their own form of lore through recurring characters and situations. Conway Twitty appearances, the various historical figures Peter claims to have interacted with, and the recurring joke characters all contribute to the show's internal mythology. These cutaways often provide brief mental breaks that can be soothing for viewers trying to wind down. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately loose, which actually makes it perfect for casual viewing. Unlike serialized dramas that require intense attention to plot details, Family Guy episodes can be enjoyed independently while still rewarding longtime viewers with references and callbacks. This makes it ideal for background viewing or for times when you're not paying complete attention. The show's musical numbers deserve special mention in our lore exploration. From Conway Twitty performances to elaborate Broadway-style productions, these musical interludes often serve as the show's most memorable and emotionally resonant moments. They break up the rapid-fire joke delivery, and provide opportunities for character development and emotional expression. The various holiday episodes throughout the series create their own seasonal lore. Christmas episodes often explore themes of family, tradition, and redemption. Halloween episodes venture into horror and supernatural territory. These special episodes often feature higher production values and more elaborate storytelling that reward dedicated viewing. The show's treatment of religion, politics, and social issues creates ongoing lore threads that reflect changing social attitudes over the show's long run. Early episodes approach these topics differently than later ones, creating an interesting timeline of cultural evolution that can be tracked through the series' progression. Guest appearances and celebrity encounters in Family Guy often become part of the show's lore through recurring references and callbacks. These celebrity interactions sometimes extend beyond single episodes, creating ongoing relationships and references that reward longtime viewers. The various alternate reality and parallel universe episodes explore different versions of the Griffin family and Quahog community. These episodes often reveal character depths and relationship dynamics that aren't apparent in regular episodes. They also provide opportunities to explore what-if scenarios that add complexity to our understanding of the main characters. Family Guy's animation style evolution tells its own story about the show's development and budget changes over time. Early episodes have a distinctly different look and feel compared to more recent ones. This visual evolution creates a subtle timeline that longtime viewers can use to place episodes chronologically, even without checking air dates. The show's relationship with Fox Network, including its cancellation and resurrection, becomes part of its own meta-lore. Episodes that reference these real-world events blur the line between fiction and reality in ways that add extra layers for dedicated fans to discover and contemplate. As we wind down our exploration of Family Guy's rich lore landscape, it's worth noting that this depth and complexity is part of what makes the show so suitable for repeated viewing and background watching. There's always another layer to discover, another connection to make, another character detail to notice. Whether you're actively watching or letting it play, while you drift off to sleep, Family Guy's universe provides a consistent, familiar, and surprisingly deep world to explore. The beauty of Family Guy lore for bedtime viewing lies in its perfect balance of familiarity and discovery. You can watch episodes you've seen dozens of times and still notice new details, catch references you missed before, or simply let the familiar voices and situations wash over you as you relax. The show's episodic nature means you won't lose important plot threads if you fall asleep mid-episode, but its rich lore rewards those moments when you find yourself unexpectedly engaged and alert. Sweet dreams. And remember that somewhere in Quahog, Peter Griffin is probably about to do something that will somehow make perfect sense within the wonderfully chaotic universe that has been entertaining us for over 2 decades. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed scrolling through endless videos trying to find something that'll help you drift off to sleep? Most people go for rain sounds or meditation videos, but there's this weird corner of the internet that's discovered something completely unexpected: Family Guy lore videos. And honestly, it makes perfect sense once you think about it. Picture this: Peter Griffin's bumbling voice rambling about some ridiculous backstory while you slowly fade into dreamland. It's like having that one friend who tells really long, meandering stories that somehow become the perfect background noise for sleep. But here's the thing: Family Guy isn't just random jokes and cutaway gags. There's actually this incredibly deep, twisted universe hiding beneath all the chaos, and when you start exploring it at bedtime, something magical happens. Tonight, we're diving into the strangest, most soothing rabbit hole on YouTube. We're talking about Family Guy lore that's specifically designed to help you sleep. And trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll understand why millions of people are choosing Stewie's time travel adventures over counting sheep. Let's start with why this works so well. Your brain needs something engaging enough to distract from racing thoughts, but not so stimulating that it keeps you awake. Family Guy lore hits this sweet spot perfectly. The familiar voices create a sense of comfort, like having old friends nearby. The storylines are complex enough to occupy your mind, but delivered in that laid-back, conversational tone that naturally slows your heart rate. The beauty of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its structure. Unlike other shows that build tension toward climactic moments, Family Guy operates on this weird, episodic flow where nothing is too serious or urgent. Even when Peter is destroying the town or Stewie is plotting world domination, there's this underlying absurdity that signals to your brain that everything is okay. It's chaos, but comfortable chaos. One of the most popular sleep topics is Stewie's time travel timeline. Now, if you've watched the show casually, you might think Stewie's time adventures are just random episodes. But when you dig deeper, there's this incredibly complex web of cause and effect that spans decades. Stewie has literally shaped the Griffin family history in ways most viewers never realize. Think about it. In one timeline, Stewie prevents his own birth, which creates this paradox where he exists but shouldn't. In another, he saves his father's life, completely altering the family dynamic. These aren't just throwaway episodes. They're building blocks of an intricate multiverse where every action ripples through time. And when someone narrates this in a gentle, sleepy voice while you're tucked in bed, it becomes this dreamy exploration of cause and effect that naturally leads your mind into sleep. The time travel lore gets even more interesting when you consider Stewie's relationship with Brian. Their adventures through different eras reveal hidden layers of both characters. Brian isn't just the family dog who talks. He's this tortured intellectual who's lived through multiple timelines, sometimes remembering previous versions of events, sometimes completely oblivious. The complexity of their friendship across different realities becomes this beautiful, melancholy meditation on friendship and loyalty. What makes this perfect for sleep is how these time travel stories often end with everything returning to normal, or at least a version of normal. There's no real stakes because the show's format demands that the status quo be maintained. Your subconscious picks up on this pattern and relaxes, knowing that no matter how wild the adventure gets, the Griffin family will be okay by morning. Another incredibly soothing topic is the hidden depth of Peter Griffin's character. On the surface, he's just this obnoxious, immature father figure. But when you start examining his backstory, there's surprising emotional complexity. Peter's relationship with his own father, Francis, reveals layers of abandonment issues and the desperate need for approval that drives much of his behavior. The Catholic guilt that shapes Peter's worldview, his struggles with identity, his genuine love for his family despite constantly endangering them, all of this creates this rich psychological portrait. When narrated as bedtime content, Peter's flaws become almost endearing. He's not a bad person, he's just deeply human in the most ridiculous possible way. The show has quietly built this mythology around Peter's various jobs and failures. From working at the brewery to his brief stint as a country music star, each career represents a different aspect of the American dream gone wrong. But instead of being depressing, it's oddly comforting. Peter always bounces back, always finds something new to be enthusiastic about. His resilience becomes this gentle reminder that failure isn't permanent, that there's always another chance to mess things up in new and interesting ways. Lois Griffin's background provides another rich vein of sleep-friendly lore. Her wealthy upbringing, her musical talents, her complicated relationship with her parents, all of this creates this fascinating contrast with her current life. She chose chaos over comfort, love over luxury. When explored in that drowsy, contemplative tone that characterizes good sleep content, Lois becomes this complex figure who represents the compromises we all make for love. The show has revealed that Lois has this incredibly patient, almost saint-like quality that allows her to tolerate Peter's behavior. But occasionally, we see cracks in this facade, moments where her true feelings break through. These glimpses of Lois's inner life become fascinating character studies when presented as gentle bedtime analysis. Meg Griffin represents something even more interesting in the show's mythology. She's the perpetual outsider, the family member who never quite fits in. But when you examine her character closely, she's often the most sensible person in the room. Her isolation isn't really about her being unlikable. It's about her being different, more grounded than the rest of her chaotic family. The psychological dynamics of how the Griffin family treats Meg reveal uncomfortable truths about family structures and social hierarchies. But when explored as sleep content, these observations become philosophical musings rather than harsh critiques. Meg's resilience in the face of constant rejection becomes almost inspiring, a quiet testament to the strength of people who don't fit conventional molds. Chris Griffin's journey through adolescence provides another layer of gentle complexity. His artistic talents, his kind heart, his struggles with self-image, all of this unfolds against the backdrop of typical teenage challenges, amplified by his family's dysfunction. Chris represents hope in the Griffin universe, the possibility that the next generation might break free from destructive patterns. The show has developed this subtle running theme about Chris's potential. He's genuinely talented, genuinely caring, but constantly undermined by his environment. When narrated as bedtime content, Chris's story becomes this quiet meditation on nurture versus nature, on how children can maintain their essential goodness despite chaotic circumstances. Brian Griffin deserves special attention because he's arguably the most complex character in the entire series. He's an intellectual trapped in a dog's body, an artist struggling with mediocrity, a liberal idealist living in a conservative household. His pretensions and failures make him simultaneously the most relatable and most frustrating character. Brian's writing career, his romantic relationships, his drinking problem, his philosophical debates with Stewie, all of this creates this rich tapestry of middle-aged disappointment wrapped in surreal comedy. When presented as sleep content, Brian's struggles become universal human experiences filtered through the lens of absurdity. The relationship between Brian and Stewie forms the emotional core of many episodes, and their dynamic has evolved significantly over the show's long run. Early episodes portrayed them as adversaries, but they've developed into this unusual friendship between two intellectuals who understand each other's isolation within the Griffin household. Their conversations, whether they're traveling through time or just sitting in the living room, often touch on profound themes of mortality, purpose, and connection. When these moments are compiled and narrated as bedtime content, they become these surprisingly deep philosophical discussions that naturally lead the mind toward contemplative rest. The supporting characters in Family Guy have developed their own rich backstories that provide endless material for sleep-friendly content. Glenn Quagmire, despite his obvious character flaws, has this complex history as a pilot and adventurer. His relationship with his father, his military service, his various romantic entanglements, all of this creates this surprisingly detailed character study. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created interesting continuity questions that lore enthusiasts love to explore. The dynamics of the friend group, how relationships change over time, how people grow apart and come back together, these themes resonate on a deeper level when explored in that gentle, bedtime storytelling style. Joe Swanson's backstory as a police officer and his adjustment to life in a wheelchair provides material for surprisingly touching character exploration. His determination, his relationship with his family, his role as the moral center of Peter's friend group, all of this unfolds into rich character development that works beautifully as sleep content. The world building in Family Guy extends beyond the main characters to include the town of Quahog itself, the recurring locations, the background characters who appear across multiple episodes, the local politics and social dynamics. All of this creates a lived-in universe that feels surprisingly real, despite its cartoon absurdity. The show has developed this consistent internal logic about how Quahog operates, from the local government to the business community to the social hierarchies. When explored as lore content, these details create this comforting sense of a complete world where everything has its place, even if that place is completely ridiculous. Family Guy's relationship with pop culture provides another fascinating avenue for sleep-friendly exploration. The show's countless references and parodies create this massive web of connections to movies, TV shows, music, and historical events. Tracing these references becomes like a gentle intellectual exercise that occupies the mind without overstimulating it. The cultural commentary embedded in these references often reveals surprising insight about American society, entertainment, and human nature. When presented as bedtime analysis, these observations become thoughtful cultural criticism delivered in the most relaxed possible format. The show's approach to continuity creates interesting puzzles for lore enthusiasts. Some episodes clearly exist in the same universe, building on previous events and character development. Others seem to exist in isolation, resetting everything back to a baseline. Understanding which episodes connect and which stand alone becomes this gentle mental exercise, perfect for bedtime. This flexible approach to continuity actually enhances the show's value as sleep content. Unlike serialized dramas where missing details might leave you confused, Family Guy's episodic nature means you can drift in and out of consciousness without losing the thread of what's happening. The animation style and visual storytelling in Family Guy contribute to its effectiveness as sleep content. The character designs are simple and comforting. The color palette is warm and familiar, and the pacing of visual jokes follows predictable patterns. Your brain learns to anticipate the rhythm of the show, which naturally promotes relaxation. The voice acting deserves special mention because the performers have developed these characters over decades. The familiarity of these voices creates an immediate sense of comfort and security. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, Alex Borstein as Lois, Mila Kunis as Meg, each voice becomes like a comfortable presence in your bedroom. The musical elements in Family Guy add another layer of sleep-friendly content. The show frequently features elaborate musical numbers that range from Broadway-style productions to simple character songs. These musical interludes often reveal character depths and emotions that regular dialogue might not capture. When compiled as sleep content, these musical moments become like gentle lullabies that showcase different aspects of the characters' personalities. Conway's witty performances, Stewie's show tunes, Peter's various musical adventures, all of this creates a diverse soundtrack for drifting off to sleep. The show's exploration of family dynamics provides universal themes that resonate regardless of the absurd context. The Griffin family, despite their dysfunction, genuinely cares about each other. Their conflicts and reconciliations follow familiar patterns that most viewers can relate to from their own family experiences. When examined as bedtime content, these family relationships become comforting reminders of the complexity and resilience of human connections. Even when Peter does something incredibly selfish or Stewie plots against his mother, the underlying love and loyalty always reassert themselves. The meta-humor in Family Guy creates another interesting layer for lore exploration. The show frequently acknowledges its own existence as a television program, breaking the fourth wall and commenting on its own production. These moments create this playful relationship between the show and its audience that enhances its value as comfort viewing. Understanding the real-world context behind certain episodes and jokes adds depth to the viewing experience without requiring intense concentration. The show's commentary on television, animation, and entertainment industry becomes gentle insider knowledge that enhances appreciation without demanding active analysis. The evolution of Family Guy over its many seasons provides rich material for comparative analysis. Early episodes had different character dynamics, different humor styles, and different production values. Tracing how the show has changed and developed becomes like following the growth of old friends. This long-term perspective on the series creates a sense of history and continuity that enhances its comfort value. You're not just watching random episodes. You're participating in this ongoing story that has unfolded over decades of real time. The fan community around Family Guy has developed its own theories and interpretations that add layers of meaning to seemingly simple episodes. These fan theories become part of the show's extended lore, creating additional content for exploration and discussion. When presented as bedtime content, these fan interpretations and theories become like bedtime stories shared among friends. They're speculative and playful rather than definitive, which makes them perfect for that drowsy state between wakefulness and sleep. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into social commentary and cultural criticism. The show has influenced animation, humor, and television production in measurable ways. Understanding this broader impact adds depth to individual episodes without requiring intense focus. This cultural context becomes another gentle layer of analysis that enhances the viewing experience. You're not just watching cartoons, you're experiencing a significant piece of contemporary American culture that has shaped entertainment and comedy. The merchandising and spin-off content around Family Guy creates additional universe expansion that lore enthusiasts love to explore. Video games, books, merchandise, and related media all contribute to the overall Griffin family mythology. These extensions of the core show become like supplementary reading that enhances understanding without being essential. They're bonus content that rewards dedicated fans while remaining accessible to casual viewers. So there you have it, the surprisingly deep and genuinely soothing world of Family Guy lore designed specifically for sleep. What started as a simple animated comedy has evolved into this rich, complex universe filled with character development, cultural commentary, and surprisingly profound themes about family, friendship, and human nature. The next time you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, scrolling through endless content options, remember that sometimes the most unexpected choices make the best bedtime companions. Peter Griffin's chaotic adventures and Stewie's time travel paradoxes might just be exactly what your brain needs to finally relax and drift off into peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the multiverse of Family Guy, everything always works out in the end, which is exactly the kind of reassurance we all need before closing our eyes for the night. What if I told you that the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island, holds some of the most intricate storytelling mysteries hidden in plain sight? Tonight, we're diving deep into the sprawling universe of Family Guy, uncovering the hidden lore, forgotten storylines, and interconnected mysteries that make this animated sitcom far more complex than most people realize. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the surprisingly rich mythology of the Griffin family and their bizarre little town. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Family Guy isn't just a collection of random cutaway gags and crude humor. Beneath all the chaos lies a carefully constructed universe with its own internal logic, recurring themes, and surprisingly deep character development that spans over 2 decades of storytelling. The show has created an entire ecosystem of characters, locations, and running narratives that interweave in ways that become apparent only when you step back and look at the bigger picture. Consider the Griffin family home itself. That modest 2-story house at 31 Spooner Street has witnessed countless adventures, but it's also a character in its own right. The house has its own history, its own secrets, and its own role in the family's story. We've seen glimpses of its past through various episodes, learning about previous owners and the strange events that have occurred within its walls. The basement has served as everything from a secret laboratory to a tornado shelter, while the attic holds forgotten memories and mysterious artifacts from the family's past. Peter Griffin, the family patriarch, represents something far more complex than the typical bumbling father figure. His character arc across hundreds of episodes reveals a man struggling with responsibility, identity, and his place in the world. His various jobs throughout the series aren't just random plot devices, they're explorations of the American, working-class experience. From his time at the toy factory, to his stint as a fisherman, from his brief career as a bodyguard, to his adventures in television production. Peter's employment history tells a story about economic uncertainty and the changing nature of work in modern America. The relationship between Peter and his father-in-law, Carter Pewterschmidt, opens up entire storylines about class, wealth, and family dynamics. Carter represents old money, established power, and traditional values, while Peter embodies working-class sensibilities and anti-establishment attitudes. Their ongoing conflict reflects broader cultural tensions about privilege, success, and what it means to be a man in contemporary society. The episodes focusing on their relationship often reveal deeper truths about both characters, showing us sides of Peter we rarely see, and humanizing Carter beyond his role as the wealthy antagonist. Lois Griffin's character development represents one of the show's most subtle long-term storytelling achievements. Initially presented as the patient, long-suffering wife, Lois has evolved into a complex character with her own ambitions, frustrations, and moral complexities. Her musical background, her brief career as a model, her struggles with motherhood, and her occasional dark turns all contribute to a character portrait that's far richer than it appears on the surface. The episodes that focus on Lois often explore themes of unfulfilled potential, the sacrifices women make for family, and the tension between personal desires and social expectations. The children of the Griffin family each represent different aspects of growing up in modern America. Meg's role as the family scapegoat initially seems cruel, but viewed through a longer lens, her character arc becomes a meditation on adolescence, social acceptance, and finding one's place in the world. Her various attempts to fit in, her brief moments of triumph, and her resilience in the face of constant rejection tell a story about teenage life that's both exaggerated and surprisingly authentic. The episodes where Meg finally stands up for herself or finds temporary happiness hit differently when you understand the full context of her journey. Chris Griffin's character explores themes of masculinity, creativity, and coming of age. His artistic talents, his awkward social interactions, and his relationship with his father create a narrative about growing up different in a world that values conformity. The episodes that focus on Chris often deal with sensitive topics like bullying, self-expression, and the pressure to live up to expectations. His friendship with Herbert, the elderly neighbor, creates uncomfortable comedy, but also touches on themes of loneliness and the generation gap. Then there's Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire series. His evolution from would-be world conqueror to sophisticated intellectual represents one of the most significant character developments in animated television. Stewie's relationship with Brian, his adventures through time and space, and his gradual coming to terms with his own identity create storylines that are simultaneously hilarious and surprisingly moving. The episodes that focus on Stewie often push the boundaries of what's possible in the Family Guy universe, introducing science fiction elements, philosophical discussions, and emotional depth that contrasts sharply with the show's typical tone. Brian Griffin serves as the show's moral center and intellectual conscience, but he's also deeply flawed in ways that make him more human than many actual human characters. His struggles with alcoholism, his pretentious intellectual posturing, his complicated romantic relationships, and his role as the family's voice of reason create a character who's simultaneously admirable and infuriating. The episodes that explore Brian's background, his relationship with his own identity as a talking dog, and his place in human society often serve as vehicles for social commentary and philosophical exploration. The town of Quahog itself is a character worthy of deep exploration. This fictional Rhode Island community has its own ecosystem of recurring characters, local institutions, and cultural traditions. The Drunken Clam serves as more than just Peter's favorite bar. It's a gathering place where working-class philosophy gets hashed out over beer and conversation. Jerome, the bartender, represents stability and wisdom in a world of chaos. The regular patrons each have their own stories and perspectives that contribute to the show's exploration of community and belonging. Quahog's local government, represented by Mayor Adam West, creates storylines that satirize American politics while also celebrating the absurdity of civic life. Mayor West's bizarre policies, his strange obsessions, and his genuine care for his constituents create a character who's simultaneously incompetent and oddly effective. The episodes dealing with local politics often reveal truths about democracy, leadership, and the relationship between citizens and their government. The show's approach to religion and spirituality, primarily explored through the Griffin family's relationship with their local church and various religious figures, creates ongoing narratives about faith, morality, and community. These storylines often challenge both religious orthodoxy and secular assumptions, creating space for nuanced discussions about belief and practice in modern American life. Family Guy's use of cutaway gags isn't just random humor, it's a storytelling technique that allows the show to explore ideas and scenarios that wouldn't fit into the main narrative. These brief vignettes often comment on historical events, pop culture phenomena, and social issues in ways that are both entertaining and insightful. The cumulative effect of hundreds of these cutaways creates a comprehensive commentary on American culture and society. The show's relationship with popular culture goes beyond simple parody. The various celebrity appearances, pop culture references, and media satires create a running commentary on fame, entertainment, and the role of media in modern life. Episodes that focus on Peter's brief brush with celebrity or Brian's attempts at literary fame explore themes about success, authenticity, and the price of public recognition. The recurring characters in Family Guy's universe each contribute to the show's exploration of different aspects of American life. Glenn Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual liberation, but episodes that delve deeper into his character reveal a more complex individual struggling with his own demons and desires. Cleveland Brown's friendship with Peter and his eventual move to his own spin-off series created storylines about race, friendship, and community that the show handled with surprising sensitivity. The show's treatment of disability, primarily through the character of Joe Swanson, creates ongoing narratives about resilience, adaptation, and the challenges faced by people with disabilities in American society. Joe's character development over the series shows him as a fully realized individual whose disability is just one aspect of his identity, not its defining characteristic. Family Guy's exploration of family dynamics extends beyond the immediate Griffin household to include the extended family members who appear throughout the series. Peter's relationship with his father Mickey, Lois's complex feelings about her parents, and the various relatives who drift in and out of episodes create a broader picture of how families function, dysfunction, and evolve over time. The show's handling of death and mortality, from the controversial killing and resurrection of Brian to the various deaths of minor characters throughout the series, creates ongoing meditations on loss, grief, and the meaning of life. These episodes often reveal the deep emotional connections between characters that might not be apparent in more comedic episodes. The science fiction elements that creep into Family Guy through Stewie's inventions and time travel adventures create opportunities for the show to explore philosophical questions about destiny, free will, and the nature of reality. The episodes dealing with alternate timelines and parallel universes suggest that the Family Guy universe is far more complex and interconnected than it initially appears. The show's treatment of education, primarily through the various school episodes and Chris and Meg's academic experiences, creates commentary on the American educational system, social hierarchies among young people, and the challenges of growing up in contemporary society. These storylines often reveal the ways that institutional structures both support and fail young people. Family Guy's exploration of work and economic life through Peter's various jobs and the family's financial struggles creates ongoing commentary about class, opportunity, and the American dream. The episodes that focus on economic hardship often reveal the ways that financial stress affects family relationships and individual well-being. The show's approach to mental health, explored through various characters' psychological struggles and Brian's role as unofficial family therapist, creates space for discussions about depression, anxiety, and the importance of mental health care. These storylines often handle serious topics with both humor and genuine sensitivity. As we wrap up this journey through the hidden depths of Family Guy's universe, it's worth noting that this exploration only scratches the surface of the rich storytelling possibilities contained within this seemingly simple animated comedy. The show's ability to balance crude humor with genuine emotional depth, social commentary with pure entertainment, and chaos with carefully constructed narrative arcs makes it a unique achievement in television comedy. The next time you watch an episode of Family Guy, try looking beyond the surface humor to see the deeper stories being told. Notice how character relationships evolve over time, how running gags develop new meanings in different contexts, and how the show uses its absurdist elements to explore very real human experiences and social issues. Sweet dreams. And remember that sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in the most unexpected places, even in the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island. What if I told you that underneath all the random cutaway gags and crude humor, Family Guy has been building one of the most intricate and bizarre mythologies in television history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the hidden lore that connects everything from Stewie's time travel adventures to the cosmic horror lurking beneath Quahog's seemingly normal surface. Get comfortable, because this journey through the Griffin family's secret universe is going to be a wild ride that might just change how you see every episode forever. Let's start with something that seems innocent enough, but opens up an entire rabbit hole of implications. Have you ever noticed that Stewie Griffin isn't just a baby with advanced intelligence? He's actually a being that exists outside the normal flow of time itself. Throughout the series, we've seen him build time machines, travel to alternate dimensions, and even meet future versions of himself. But here's where it gets interesting. In several episodes, Stewie demonstrates knowledge of events that haven't happened yet, and sometimes he seems to be aware that he's in a television show. This isn't just random comedy writing. There's a consistent pattern that suggests Stewie might be some kind of temporal entity that chose to inhabit the body of a baby for reasons we're only beginning to understand. Think about it. He's built multiple time machines from scratch using household items. He's created clones, developed advanced weaponry, and even constructed interdimensional portals. No normal baby, no matter how intelligent, could accomplish these things without some kind of supernatural assistance or inherent cosmic power. The evidence becomes even more compelling when you consider his relationship with Brian. Unlike other family members who seem to understand Stewie only sporadically, Brian consistently communicates with him on an adult level. But Brian isn't just any dog. He's a talking dog who drives cars, writes novels, and has existential crises about the nature of reality. The fact that these two characters can communicate perfectly suggests they might both be operating on a different plane of existence than the rest of the family. Speaking of Brian, let's explore his own mysterious origins. He was found as a stray by the Griffin family, but his background remains largely unexplained. He drinks alcohol, smokes cigarettes, and engages in romantic relationships with humans. In several episodes, we've seen him question his own nature and struggle with the absurdity of being a talking dog in a world where most animals don't speak. This existential awareness might be the key to understanding his true nature. There's a theory that Brian represents a bridge between the normal world and the supernatural elements that permeate Quahog. He's intelligent enough to recognize the strangeness around him, but trapped in a form that prevents him from fully participating in human society. His conversations with Stewie often touch on philosophical and scientific concepts that suggest both characters are aware of deeper truths about their reality. Now let's talk about Peter Griffin himself, because beneath his bumbling exterior lies something far more complex. Peter has survived explosions, falls from incredible heights, and injuries that should have killed him dozens of times over. He's also demonstrated superhuman strength in various episodes, lifting cars and fighting characters with obvious supernatural abilities. But more importantly, Peter seems to be a nexus point for the weird events that happen in Quahog. Everywhere Peter goes, reality seems to bend slightly. Characters break into musical numbers for no reason. People appear and disappear without explanation. The laws of physics become suggestions rather than rules. It's as if Peter's presence weakens the barriers between the normal world and something much stranger. This could explain why the Griffin family attracts so many bizarre situations and supernatural encounters. Consider the episode where Peter gains psychic powers, or the times he's been visited by supernatural entities. These aren't isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern that suggests Peter might be unknowingly channeling some kind of cosmic energy. His simple-minded nature could be a protective mechanism that prevents him from fully comprehending his own power, because if Peter ever became truly aware of his abilities, the consequences could be catastrophic. Lois Griffin presents her own mysteries. On the surface, she's the long-suffering wife trying to keep her chaotic family together. But Lois has her own dark secrets and hidden depths. She comes from a wealthy family with connections that extend far beyond what we see on screen. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, isn't just rich. He's connected to military-industrial complexes and shadowy organizations that operate behind the scenes. Throughout the series, Lois has demonstrated skills and knowledge that suggest extensive training in areas most housewives would never encounter. She's fluent in multiple languages, skilled in combat, and has connections to criminal organizations. In several episodes, she's shown leading double lives that involve activities ranging from boxing to working with international intelligence agencies. These aren't random plot devices, but hints at a much larger story about who Lois really is and why she ended up with the Griffin family. There's also the question of how Lois manages to hold the family together despite the constant chaos. She seems to have an almost supernatural ability to adapt to whatever insane situation her family creates. Whether it's dealing with Stewie's death rays or Peter's latest scheme to destroy the neighborhood, Lois always finds a way to restore some semblance of normalcy. This suggests she might be operating with knowledge or abilities that go beyond what we see on the surface. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this strange mythology. It's supposedly a normal Rhode Island community, but the events that occur there on a regular basis defy all logic. The town has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Its residents include everything from former Nazis to aliens to interdimensional beings. The mayor is a corrupt official who openly admits to criminal activities, yet somehow the town continues to function. What's really interesting is how quickly the residents of Quahog accept supernatural events. When a chicken fights Peter through half the town, destroying buildings and causing massive property damage, everyone just goes back to their normal lives afterward. When time travel events create paradoxes that should fundamentally alter reality, the town adapts without question. This suggests that Quahog exists in a state of flexible reality where the impossible becomes routine. The recurring locations in Quahog also hint at deeper mysteries. The Drunken Clam isn't just a bar. It's a place where characters regularly receive prophetic dreams and encounter supernatural entities. Quahog Elementary School has been the site of numerous reality-bending events. Even the Griffin house itself seems to exist partially outside normal space and time, with rooms that appear and disappear and basement areas that extend far beyond what the exterior structures should allow. Let's dive deeper into the show's treatment of death and resurrection, because Family Guy has a very loose relationship with mortality that suggests something profound about the nature of its reality. Characters die regularly, sometimes multiple times in the same episode, only to return without explanation. Brian has died and been brought back to life. Kenny McCormick from South Park has appeared in Family Guy, bringing his own resurrection mythology with him. This casual treatment of death isn't just a comedy device. It suggests that the characters exist in a reality where death is temporary or where multiple versions of the same character can exist simultaneously. Stewie has encountered alternate versions of himself and his family members from different timelines and dimensions. These aren't dreams or imagination sequences, but actual encounters with other versions of reality. The implications of this go far beyond simple comedy. If characters can die and return, if alternate versions of themselves exist in parallel dimensions, then the entire show might be taking place across multiple realities simultaneously. Each episode could be showing us events from different timelines or dimensions where slightly different versions of the characters exist. This would explain the show's inconsistent continuity and the way characters sometimes seem to forget major events from previous episodes. They're not forgetting. They're simply different versions of themselves who never experienced those events. The show isn't ignoring its own history. It's showing us glimpses of an infinite multiverse where every possible variation of the Griffin family's story plays out simultaneously. The religious and mythological elements in Family Guy also contribute to this deeper lore. The show has featured appearances by God, Jesus, the devil, and various other religious figures. These aren't parody versions, but actual supernatural entities who interact with the characters and influence events in Quahog. This suggests that the show's reality operates under a cosmology where divine and infernal forces are real and active. More intriguingly, these supernatural entities often seem to have specific interest in the Griffin family. God has personally intervened in their lives multiple times. Death himself has appeared as a character and formed relationships with family members. This level of cosmic attention suggests that the Griffins aren't just random people, but individuals who play important roles in some larger supernatural conflict or cosmic plan. The show's frequent use of cutaway gags might also be more than just random humor. These sequences often show Peter or other characters in completely different time periods, locations, or situations. What if these aren't imaginary scenarios, but glimpses of other realities where versions of these characters actually exist? The cutaway structure could be the show's way of revealing the multiverse that underlies its narrative. This interpretation would mean that every absurd cutaway gag is actually a window into an alternate dimension. Peter as a knight in medieval times isn't just a joke, it's a glimpse of a reality where a version of Peter actually lived during that era. The seemingly random nature of these sequences could be showing us how the barriers between dimensions occasionally thin, allowing characters to perceive events from parallel worlds. Cleveland Brown's spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy takes on new significance in this context. His move to Virginia and subsequent return isn't just a narrative convenience, it's evidence of how characters can move between different versions of reality. The Cleveland show might have been showing us events from a dimension where Cleveland never moved back to Quahog, while his return to Family Guy represents a convergence of timelines. The relationship between Family Guy and other animated shows in the same universe adds another layer to this mythology. The Simpsons crossover episode wasn't just a marketing stunt. It was a demonstration that these shows exist in connected realities. Characters can travel between Springfield and Quahog because these locations exist in the same multiverse, just in different dimensional frequencies. As we dive deeper into the show's lore, we start to see patterns that suggest a hidden intelligence behind the chaos. The seemingly random events that plague the Griffin family might actually be tests or challenges designed by cosmic forces to determine their worthiness for some greater purpose. Stewie's advanced intelligence, Brian's existential awareness, Peter's reality-warping presence, and Lois's mysterious background could all be pieces of a larger puzzle. The show's self-aware humor and frequent breaking of the fourth wall might be characters occasionally becoming conscious of their true nature as beings in a constructed reality. When characters acknowledge that they're in a television show, they might be experiencing moments of cosmic awareness where they perceive the true nature of their existence. This brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of Family Guy's hidden lore. The show might be depicting the gradual awakening of its characters to their true nature as multidimensional beings trapped in a television narrative. Each season, the characters become slightly more aware of the absurdity of their situations and the arbitrary nature of the rules governing their reality. Stewie's evolution from would-be world conqueror to time-traveling adventurer represents his growing understanding of his cosmic nature. Brian's increasing cynicism and existential crises reflect his awareness that he's trapped between worlds. Peter's adventures become more outlandish because he's unconsciously pushing against the boundaries of his reality. Lois's hidden depths suggest she's always been aware of the truth, but has been protecting her family from it. The true horror and beauty of Family Guy's lore lies in this gradual revelation that nothing is as it seems. What appears to be random comedy is actually a complex meditation on the nature of reality, identity, and consciousness. The Griffin family's bizarre adventures are their unconscious attempts to break free from the limitations of their constructed world and discover their true nature as cosmic entities playing out an eternal story across infinite dimensions. So the next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details that seem like throwaway gags. Notice how death has no permanent meaning, how reality bends around the characters, how they sometimes seem aware of forces beyond their comprehension. You're not just watching a comedy show. You're witnessing the gradual awakening of beings who are slowly discovering that they exist in a reality far stranger and more wonderful than they ever imagined. This is the true lore of Family Guy. Hidden beneath layers of crude humor and random cutaways, a story about consciousness trying to understand itself across multiple realities and infinite possibilities. Sweet dreams. Picture this. You're scrolling through endless videos trying to find something to help you drift off to sleep, and somehow you stumble across Family Guy lore. Sounds weird, right? But here's the thing that might surprise you. The chaotic world of the Griffin family actually contains some of the most bizarrely comforting storytelling patterns that work perfectly as background noise for sleep. Tonight, we're diving deep into the unexpected rabbit hole of Family Guy's hidden mythology, character backstories, and running gags that have been quietly building for over 2 decades. Trust me, by the end of this exploration, you'll understand why this animated chaos makes for surprisingly perfect sleep content. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Family Guy isn't just random jokes thrown together. There's actually a complex web of continuity that runs through the entire series, creating this weird sense of familiarity that your brain craves when winding down. Think about it. Every episode follows certain predictable patterns. Peter does something stupid. Lois gets frustrated. Stewie plots world domination. Brian gets philosophical. Chris says something innocent yet profound, and Meg gets ignored. These patterns become almost meditative when you're not actively watching but just listening. The Griffin house itself has become this iconic location that feels more real than most TV homes. You know exactly where everything is. The living room with that brown couch facing the TV. The kitchen where most family arguments happen. Peter and Lois's bedroom where countless cutaway gags have originated. Stewie's room with all his advanced technology that somehow nobody questions. This geographical consistency creates a mental map that feels safe and familiar, exactly what your brain wants when transitioning to sleep. Now, let's talk about Peter Griffin's backstory, because it's way more elaborate than you might remember. Peter wasn't always the bumbling patriarch we know today. His childhood in Rhode Island shaped him in ways that the show has been slowly revealing for years. His relationship with his father, Mickey McFinnigan, later revealed to be Francis Griffin, created deep-seated issues around authority and approval that explained so much of his adult behavior. The revelation that Francis wasn't even his biological father added layers to Peter's identity crisis that runs throughout the series. Peter's various jobs throughout the show create this strange career timeline that somehow makes sense in the Family Guy universe. From his early days at the toy factory to his time at the brewery, each workplace became a setting for elaborate storylines and character development. His relationships with his co-workers like Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland formed the foundation of the show's secondary character network. These aren't just random neighbors. They're part of an intricate social ecosystem that's been developing since episode 1. Speaking of Joe Swanson, his backstory represents some of the show's most surprisingly deep storytelling. The details of how he became paralyzed have been explored multiple times, each revealing adding new layers to his character. His police career, his relationship with his wife Bonnie, and his struggles with his disability are handled with unexpected sensitivity for a show known for its controversial humor. Joe's friendship with Peter represents this weird masculine bond that transcends typical sitcom relationships. Glenn Quagmire might seem like a one-note character, but his history is incredibly complex. His career as a pilot isn't just a job setup for jokes. It's connected to his adventurous personality, his worldliness, and his complex relationship with commitment. The episodes exploring his relationship with his father, his various romantic entanglements, and his twisted psychology reveal a character struggling with deeper issues beneath the surface humor. His rivalry with Brian creates ongoing tension that drives multiple episode plots. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created this weird narrative gap that the writers have handled in interesting ways. His move to Stoolbend and eventual return to Quahog wasn't just a business decision. It was woven into the show's mythology in ways that acknowledge the real-world circumstances while maintaining fictional continuity. His relationship with his new wife Donna and his blended family created storylines that explored themes of second chances and family dynamics. Brian Griffin represents perhaps the show's most complex character development. He's not just a talking dog, he's a struggling writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and Peter's best friend, all wrapped into one character. His various romantic relationships, from his puppy love crushes to his serious adult relationships, have been explored with surprising depth. His death and resurrection created one of the show's most emotionally impactful storylines, proving that viewers had formed genuine emotional attachments to these characters. Brian's literary aspirations connect to larger themes about artistic struggle and unfulfilled potential that run throughout the series. His unfinished novel, his various writing projects, and his intellectual pretensions create this ongoing character arc about creativity and disappointment. His relationship with Stewie represents one of television's most unique friendships, transcending the typical pet owner dynamic to become something genuinely touching. Stewie Griffin's evolution from world-conquering villain to sexually confused genius baby represents one of the most significant character developments in animation history. His early episodes focused on elaborate schemes to kill Lois and take over the world. Gradually, the show revealed deeper layers to his personality, exploring his relationships, his sexuality, and his genuine affection for his family, despite his sinister exterior. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie and Brian created an entire subplot mythology that spans multiple seasons. Their adventures through different time periods aren't just random comedy sketches. They're connected stories that explore themes of friendship, consequence, and the nature of reality itself. These episodes often contain the show's most sophisticated storytelling and emotional moments. Lois Griffin's background as a member of the wealthy Pewterschmidt family adds class dynamics to the show that create ongoing storylines. Her relationship with her parents, particularly her disapproving father Carter, creates tension that drives multiple episode plots. Her past as a fighter pilot, her various career attempts, and her struggles with being married to Peter add complexity to what could have been a simple housewife character. The Pewterschmidt family wealth creates opportunities for episodes exploring economic disparity, social climbing, and family expectations. Lois's siblings and their various successes highlight Peter's failures, while also exploring themes about different paths to happiness and fulfillment. These family dynamics feel surprisingly realistic for a cartoon family. Chris Griffin might seem like the least developed Griffin family member, but his character has subtle depths that emerge over time. His artistic talents, his social struggles, and his innocent observations about adult world create moments of unexpected wisdom. His relationship with his father Peter explores themes about masculine expectations and parent-child communication that feel genuine despite the show's comedic framework. Meg Griffin's role as the family scapegoat has evolved into something more complex than simple abuse humor. Episodes exploring her internal life, her social struggles, and her occasional moments of strength reveal a character dealing with realistic teenage issues. Her relationship with her family, particularly her mother Lois, touches on themes about parental favoritism and sibling dynamics that many viewers can relate to. The show's supporting characters create this entire universe of interconnected relationships. Characters like Mayor West, Principal Shepard, Dr. Hartman, and the various shopkeepers and townspeople aren't just one-off joke characters. They're part of Quahog's social fabric, appearing consistently enough to create familiarity and continuity that makes the fictional town feel like a real place. The recurring villains, like Ernie the giant chicken, the greased-up deaf guy, and various one-episode antagonists, create ongoing storylines that span multiple seasons. These aren't just random encounters. They're part of Peter's personal mythology, representing different aspects of his character conflicts and growth. Family Guy's cutaway gags might seem random, but they actually follow certain patterns and themes that create consistency within the chaos. The historical references, the pop culture parodies, and the absurdist scenarios often connect to the main storyline in subtle ways, reinforcing character traits or episode themes through seemingly unrelated comedy bits. The show's approach to continuity is uniquely flexible, allowing for both strict adherence to character development and complete abandonment of logic when comedy demands it. This creates a viewing experience that feels both familiar and unpredictable, perfect for background listening where you can drift in and out without losing track of what's happening. The musical elements of Family Guy, from Conway Twitty appearances to elaborate song numbers, create rhythm and pacing that works well for sleep content. These musical interludes provide natural breaks in dialogue while maintaining the show's energy and entertainment value. The familiar melodies and recurring musical themes create audio comfort that helps with relaxation. The voice acting consistency across hundreds of episodes creates character familiarity that transcends individual storylines. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, along with the consistent supporting cast, create audio comfort that works particularly well when you're not actively watching. These familiar voices become almost like friendly companions as you drift off to sleep. The show's treatment of holidays and special occasions has created annual traditions within the Family Guy universe. Christmas episodes, Halloween specials, and other holiday-themed stories create seasonal familiarity that connects to real-world calendar events while maintaining the show's unique comedic perspective. These special episodes often contain the series' most heartfelt moments alongside the typical humor. Family Guy's approach to social commentary, while often controversial, creates ongoing themes about American culture, politics, and social issues that give depth to what could be purely surface-level comedy. The show's willingness to tackle difficult subjects, even through its comedic lens, creates content that engages with real-world issues while maintaining entertainment value. The international episodes and travel storylines have created a broader world beyond Quahog, showing how the Griffin family dynamics work in different settings while maintaining character consistency. These episodes expand the show's mythology while reinforcing core character traits and relationships that define the series. As we wind down this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth noting how the show's longevity has created this massive tapestry of interconnected stories, character developments, and running gags that form a complete fictional universe. Whether you're using it as sleep content or just appreciating its complexity, Family Guy offers way more than surface-level entertainment. The familiar voices, predictable patterns, and comforting chaos create perfect background audio for relaxation. Sweet dreams. And remember, tomorrow there will always be more Family Guy lore to discover and explore in this wonderfully weird animated world that's been part of our cultural landscape for over 20 years. What if I told you that Family Guy was originally supposed to end after just 3 seasons, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died on September 11th, which completely changed the show's trajectory? The animated series that millions of people watch every day has some absolutely mind-blowing secrets hiding beneath its crude humor and cutaway gags that most fans have never heard about. I've spent countless hours diving deep into the production history, behind-the-scenes drama, and hidden connections that make Family Guy one of the most fascinating shows on television. From celebrity feuds that shaped entire storylines to animation techniques that revolutionized the industry, this show has more layers than you might imagine. Let me take you on a journey through the most incredible Family Guy secrets that will completely change how you watch the show. We're going to uncover everything from the real-life inspirations behind your favorite characters to the corporate battles that almost killed the series multiple times. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Stewie, Peter, or even Brian the same way again. First, let's talk about something that literally saved Seth MacFarlane's life and indirectly saved Family Guy from never existing. On September 11th, 2001, MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that hit the World Trade Center. He had a ticket and was scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning. The only reason he survived was because his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, telling him the flight left at 8:15 when it actually left at 7:45. MacFarlane overslept, arrived at the airport, and discovered he had missed his flight by just 10 minutes. He was initially frustrated about missing the flight and having to reschedule his meetings in Los Angeles. It wasn't until he was sitting in the airport waiting area that he saw the news reports and realized the plane he was supposed to be on had crashed into the North Tower. This near-death experience profoundly impacted MacFarlane's approach to Family Guy. The show's later seasons began incorporating more political commentary and social satire, partly because MacFarlane felt he had been given a second chance to use his platform meaningfully. The controversial episodes that tackle everything from religion to politics can be traced back to this life-changing moment when MacFarlane realized how fragile life really is. But that's just the beginning of Family Guy's incredible origin story. The show itself was born from MacFarlane's college thesis film at the Rhode Island School of Design. He created a 9-minute animated short called The Life of Larry, featuring a character named Larry Cummings, who was essentially a prototype for Peter Griffin. The animation was crude, the jokes were simpler, but the DNA of Family Guy was already there. What's absolutely fascinating is that MacFarlane submitted this college project to the animation studio Hanna-Barbera, and they were so impressed they hired him immediately. He was just 22 years old and suddenly found himself working on shows like Johnny Bravo and Cow and Chicken. But MacFarlane had bigger dreams for his Larry character. He spent 2 years developing and refining the concept, eventually creating another short film called Larry and Steve, which featured the first appearance of a Brian-like dog character. This short caught the attention of Fox executives who were desperately looking for animated content to compete with The Simpsons. The network gave MacFarlane an unprecedented deal, making him the youngest executive producer in television history at age 24. The character inspirations go much deeper than most people realize. Peter Griffin wasn't just a random creation. He was actually based on a security guard that MacFarlane knew during his time working at Hanna-Barbera. This security guard had the same loud, obnoxious personality and even shared some of Peter's physical characteristics. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he would observe this guard's behavior and mannerisms, essentially using him as a real-life reference for what would become one of television's most iconic characters. Stewie Griffin's character has an even more complex origin story. Initially, MacFarlane envisioned Stewie as a completely different type of character. In the original concept, Stewie was going to be much more obviously evil and would have actually succeeded in some of his schemes to kill Lois. The character was inspired by the child villain from a 1970 seconds British film, but MacFarlane realized that having a baby actually commit murder would make the show too dark for network television. The decision to make Stewie more ambiguously evil and eventually more sympathetic was one of the best creative choices the show ever made. It allowed the character to evolve over multiple seasons, becoming less focused on matricide and more focused on time travel, world domination, and his complex relationship with Brian. This evolution wasn't planned from the beginning, but happened organically as the writers discovered what worked best for the character. Speaking of Brian, his character represents something unprecedented in animated television. While other shows had featured talking animals, Brian was the first cartoon dog to be treated as a complete intellectual equal to the human characters. MacFarlane made a conscious decision to never explain how Brian learned to talk or why he's so intelligent compared to other dogs in the show's universe. This creative choice was actually controversial within the animation industry because it broke the traditional rules of cartoon logic. Most animated shows establish clear parameters for their fantastical elements, but Family Guy deliberately leaves Brian's abilities unexplained. This ambiguity allows the character to function as both comic relief and serious, dramatic foil, depending on what the story requires. The show's distinctive cutaway gag structure wasn't part of the original concept either. In the early episodes, Family Guy followed a more traditional sitcom structure with linear storytelling. The famous random cutaways that interrupt the main plot were actually added later when MacFarlane realized they could use these moments to explore more surreal and experimental types of humor. These cutaways became the show's signature element, but they also created massive production challenges. Each cutaway requires additional character designs, backgrounds, and sometimes entirely different animation styles. A single episode might feature dozens of different mini-scenes that have nothing to do with the main plot, essentially making every Family Guy episode like 3 or 4 different shows combined into one. The voice acting process reveals another fascinating layer of the show's complexity. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. What most people don't realize is that he records all of these voices in different sessions to maintain consistency. He can't switch between the voices quickly enough during regular recording sessions, so each character's dialogue is recorded separately and then edited together. MacFarlane has mentioned that Peter Griffin's voice is the most physically demanding because it requires him to strain his vocal cords to achieve that distinctive gravelly tone. After long recording sessions, MacFarlane sometimes loses his natural speaking voice temporarily because of the physical stress of performing Peter's dialogue. The show's relationship with censorship has created some of the most interesting behind-the-scenes stories in television history. Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, but there's actually a sophisticated system of negotiations between the writers and network censors. The writers deliberately include jokes that they know will be rejected, using them as bargaining chips to keep the jokes they really want. This strategy has allowed Family Guy to get away with content that would never make it onto other network shows. The censors focus their attention on the obviously problematic material, which gives the writers cover to include more subtle but equally controversial content. It's essentially a game of misdirection that happens during every episode's production process. One of the most significant moments in Family Guy history happened when the show was actually canceled by Fox in 2002 after just 3 seasons. The network executives felt the show was too expensive to produce and wasn't attracting enough viewers in key demographics. This cancellation seemed like the end of the story, but something unprecedented happened next. The show's reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block became incredibly popular, attracting larger audiences than the original Fox broadcasts had achieved. Simultaneously, the Family Guy DVD sales broke records for animated television releases. Fans were literally buying seasons of a canceled show faster than DVDs of shows that were still in production. This combination of strong cable ratings and exceptional DVD sales convinced Fox to bring Family Guy back from the dead, making it the first canceled series in television history to be revived based primarily on home video performance. The revival created a new business model that other networks began copying, proving that traditional ratings weren't the only way to measure a show's value. The resurrection of Family Guy also changed how the show approached storytelling. When MacFarlane returned to production, he knew the show had been given an unlikely second chance, and this awareness influenced the writing in subtle but important ways. The characters became more self-aware, the jokes became more metatextual, and the show began directly addressing its own cancellation and revival in various episodes. Behind the scenes, the animation process for Family Guy utilizes techniques that most viewers never notice, but which significantly impact the show's distinctive look. Unlike many other animated series that use traditional cell animation or simple digital techniques, Family Guy employs a hybrid approach that combines hand-drawn character animation with digitally created backgrounds and effects. This hybrid technique allows the animators to create more dynamic camera movements and complex visual gags than would be possible with purely traditional methods. The show's famous chicken fights, elaborate musical numbers, and surreal cutaway sequences all rely on this sophisticated blend of old and new animation technologies. The writing room for Family Guy operates differently from most television shows because of the unique challenges created by the cutaway structure. The writers have to create two different types of content for every episode: the main storyline that follows traditional narrative rules, and the cutaway material that can be completely disconnected from reality. This dual writing process means that Family Guy episodes are actually much more complex to construct than they appear on screen. The writers have to ensure that the cutaways don't disrupt the pacing of the main story, while also making sure that each mini-scene within the cutaways has its own complete comedic arc. It's like writing a regular television episode while simultaneously writing dozens of very short comedy sketches. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture more than almost any other television show, with countless jokes, phrases, and visual gags becoming viral content across social media platforms. The Surfin' Bird episode alone generated thousands of remixes, parodies, and tribute videos from fans around the world. This cultural influence wasn't accidental but resulted from MacFarlane's deliberate decision to make the show's humor as quotable and shareable as possible. The cutaway structure naturally creates bite-sized pieces of content that work perfectly for online sharing, essentially making every episode a collection of potential viral moments. The business side of Family Guy reveals how successful the show has become beyond just television ratings. The merchandise empire includes everything from action figures to video games, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue annually. The show's characters have appeared in commercials, theme park attractions, and even academic studies about animation and comedy. What makes this commercial success particularly interesting is that it happened despite the show being canceled once and facing constant criticism from various groups. Family Guy proved that controversial content could be incredibly profitable if it connected with audiences authentically, creating a template that many other shows have tried to follow. The voice cast beyond Seth MacFarlane includes some fascinating stories about how actors were recruited and how their characters evolved. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, was actually hired before the show was even greenlit by Fox. MacFarlane was so impressed by her audition that he wrote additional material specifically for her character, expanding Lois's role far beyond what was originally planned. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg Griffin, was just 14 years old when she started working on the show. Her voice literally changed during the early seasons as she went through adolescence while recording the character. The producers had to make subtle adjustments to accommodate her changing vocal range, creating a unique situation where a cartoon character's voice evolved naturally over time. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars differs significantly from other animated series. While The Simpsons typically has celebrities play versions of themselves, Family Guy often has famous actors voice completely original characters or play historical figures in cutaway gags. This approach allows the show to utilize celebrity talent in more creative and unexpected ways. Some of the most memorable Family Guy moments feature celebrities doing things they would never do on other shows. Precisely because the animated format and the show's irreverent tone give everyone involved permission to be more experimental. The result is guest performances that often become more famous than the celebrity's live-action work. The international versions of Family Guy reveal how the show's humor translates across different cultures and languages. The cutaway gags often require complete restructuring for international audiences because the references are too specifically American to make sense in other countries. Foreign language versions sometimes feature entirely different jokes that serve the same comedic function but use locally relevant references. This localization process has created dozens of different versions of Family Guy that share the same characters and basic structure but feature significantly different content. In some ways, these international versions are like alternate universe versions of the show, exploring how the same comedic sensibilities might express themselves in different cultural contexts. The technological evolution of Family Guy's production reflects broader changes in the animation industry. Early episodes were produced using techniques that were already becoming obsolete, while recent seasons utilize cutting-edge digital tools that would have been impossible when the show first aired. Despite these technical advances, the show has maintained its distinctive visual style by deliberately limiting how much the animation quality improves. This conscious decision to maintain visual consistency has allowed Family Guy to feel timeless in ways that many other long-running animated series don't achieve. Episodes from different decades can be watched together without jarring visual discontinuities, creating a cohesive viewing experience across more than 20 years of production. The legacy of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into academic and cultural analysis. Universities offer courses that study the show as an example of postmodern comedy, examining how its cutaway structure reflects contemporary media consumption patterns and attention spans. The show has essentially become a case study in how traditional narrative techniques can be deconstructed while still maintaining audience engagement. As Family Guy continues into its third decade of production, its influence on comedy, animation, and popular culture remains undeniable. From Seth MacFarlane's near-death experience that changed everything to the unprecedented cancellation and revival that rewrote television business models, the show represents one of the most fascinating success stories in entertainment history. The next time you watch Peter Griffin stumble through another ridiculous adventure or listen to Stewie's sophisticated observations, remember that you're experiencing the result of countless creative decisions, business battles, and pure accidents that somehow combine to create something truly unique in television history. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice by Fox and nearly became lost media forever? Or that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? Welcome to the bizarre, twisted, and absolutely fascinating world of Family Guy lore that most fans have never heard about. I'm talking about secrets so wild that they make the show's most outrageous episodes look tame by comparison. We're diving deep into the creation myths, the behind-the-scenes drama, the near-death experiences, and the corporate battles that shaped one of television's most controversial animated series. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane, the creator and voice of Peter Griffin, Brian, and Stewie, was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 1-1 on September 11th, 2001. That's right. The same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. But here's the crazy part. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. If he had made that flight, Family Guy would never have existed beyond its first season, and animation history would be completely different. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. Family Guy has one of the most bizarre resurrection tales in television history. The show premiered in 1999 and was actually performing decently in the ratings, but Fox kept moving it around to different time slots. You know how networks love to do that, right? Well, they moved it so many times that viewers couldn't keep track of when it was on. Eventually, Fox canceled it in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While the show was dead on television, something magical was happening in the afterlife. Adult Swim picked up the syndication rights and started airing reruns late at night. College students and young adults discovered the show and fell in love with it. At the same time, DVD sales were going through the roof. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Fox did something almost unprecedented in television history. They brought back a canceled show based purely on DVD sales and cable reruns. Family Guy became the first show ever to be revived solely because of its success in syndication and home video. It was like watching a TV show literally rise from the dead. But the resurrection story gets even weirder. When Fox brought the show back, they didn't just order a few episodes to test the waters. They ordered 53 new episodes right off the bat. That's an enormous vote of confidence for a show that had already been canceled once. Seth MacFarlane suddenly went from unemployed animator to one of the most powerful people in Hollywood practically overnight. Now let's talk about the creative origins of the show, because they're absolutely fascinating. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy when he was just 24 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. But here's what most people don't know. The show was originally pitched as a much more traditional family sitcom. The early concepts were way more grounded and realistic than what we ended up with. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be much more like a typical TV dad, still bumbling and overweight, but not the complete psychopath we know and love today. Stewie wasn't even going to be particularly smart or evil in the original concept. He was just going to be a regular baby with maybe slightly advanced vocabulary. Brian was going to be a normal dog who occasionally made witty observations but wasn't going to be a full conversation partner for the family. What changed everything was Seth MacFarlane's love of old Hollywood and classic animation. He grew up watching Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and classic Disney cartoons, and he wanted to bring that level of visual comedy and surreal humor to primetime television. The problem was that most networks were terrified of anything too weird or experimental. Fox, however, was in a unique position in the late 90s. The Simpsons had proven that animated shows could work in prime time, but Fox was still considered the edgy, rebellious network. They were willing to take risks that ABC, CBS, and NBC would never consider. So when Seth pitched his cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, Fox was intrigued enough to order a pilot. The pilot episode is actually incredibly different from the show we know today. The animation style was cruder, the jokes were more straightforward, and the characters hadn't yet developed their extreme personalities. If you watch that original pilot, you can barely recognize it as the same show. It's like looking at baby photos of a celebrity. You can kind of see the resemblance, but it's clearly a work in progress. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's development is how the characters evolved over time. Take Stewie, for example. In the early seasons, he was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. His evil schemes were the driving force behind many episodes. But as the show went on, the writers realized that Stewie was funnier when he was dealing with more relatable problems, like sexuality, relationships, and growing up. This evolution wasn't accidental. It reflected Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and person. When he created Stewie, MacFarlane was a young, single guy who thought evil baby plots were hilarious. But as he got older and more experienced, he realized that character-driven comedy was more sustainable than pure shock value. The same thing happened with Brian. Originally, he was just the voice of reason in the Griffin household, the one sane character who could comment on everyone else's craziness. But over time, the writers started exploring Brian's flaws and insecurities, turning him into one of the most complex characters on television. His pretentiousness, his failed writing career, his drinking problem, all of these traits developed organically as the show matured. Speaking of character development, let's talk about some of the inspiration behind the Griffin family. Peter Griffin was actually based on a security guard that Seth MacFarlane worked with during a summer job. The guy was loud, obnoxious, and completely inappropriate, but somehow lovable at the same time. MacFarlane found himself fascinated by how someone could be so offensive, yet still maintain friendships and a family. Lois was inspired by MacFarlane's own mother, but also by the classic TV mom archetype. The twist was making her come from a wealthy family, which allowed the writers to explore themes of class and privilege. It also gave them an excuse to put the Griffins in situations they normally couldn't afford, like fancy parties and expensive vacations. The supporting characters have equally interesting origins. Glenn Quagmire was originally supposed to be a minor character who appeared in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, but Seth MacFarlane's voice performance was so distinctive and memorable that the writers kept bringing him back. The giggity giggity catchphrase wasn't even scripted. MacFarlane improvised it during recording, and everyone thought it was so funny that they made it Quagmire's signature sound. Cleveland Brown started as a simple background character, but MacFarlane realized that having a calm, reasonable neighbor made Peter's craziness even funnier by contrast. The character became so popular that he eventually got his own spin-off show, though that's a whole other story of corporate politics and creative struggles. One of the most controversial aspects of Family Guy is its use of cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that have nothing to do with the main plot. Some critics hate them, calling them lazy writing and cheap laughs. But here's the thing. Those cutaways were actually inspired by some of the most sophisticated comedy ever created. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he was fascinated by how the Pythons would interrupt their sketches with completely random animations and non sequiturs. He also loved the Marx Brothers movies, where the plot would screech to a halt for a musical number or a bizarre comedy bit that had nothing to do with anything else. The cutaway gags serve a specific purpose in Family Guy's comedy structure. They allow the writers to do jokes that would be impossible within the constraints of a normal sitcom plot. Want to make fun of a celebrity or reference an obscure movie? Just have Peter say, "This reminds me of the time I," and cut to whatever crazy scenario you can imagine. But here's something most fans don't realize. Many of those cutaways are actually incredibly expensive to produce. Each one requires new character designs, new backgrounds, new voice acting, and sometimes even new music. A single 30-second cutaway can cost more to animate than an entire scene of regular dialogue. Fox executives were initially horrified by how much money the show was spending on these seemingly throwaway jokes. The financial aspect of Family Guy is actually one of the most interesting parts of its story. When the show first premiered, animation was still considered a niche market for adults. The Simpsons was successful, but it was seen as a unique exception rather than proof that there was a broader market for animated comedy. Family Guy's success helped prove that there was actually a huge appetite for adult animated shows. This paved the way for series like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Archer, Rick and Morty, and countless others. Without Family Guy's commercial success, the entire landscape of adult animation might look completely different today. The merchandising aspect is equally fascinating. Family Guy products generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. T-shirts, toys, video games, Christmas ornaments, you name it, and there's probably a Family Guy version of it. The Stewie character alone has spawned an entire industry of baby-themed merchandise with surprisingly dark humor. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Family Guy's cultural impact is how it changed the way we think about offensive comedy. The show pushes boundaries that would have been unthinkable on television even 10 years before it premiered. Yet somehow, it manages to get away with jokes that would destroy other shows. The secret is in the show's self-awareness. Family Guy knows that it's offensive, and it's constantly making jokes about its own offensiveness. When Peter does something terrible, the other characters usually call him out on it. When the show makes a controversial reference, it often follows it up with a joke about how inappropriate the reference was. This meta-humor creates a kind of protective bubble around the show's more controversial content. Viewers understand that they're not supposed to take Peter Griffin seriously as a role model. He's clearly meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when someone has no filter and no self-awareness. The voice acting on Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because it's honestly incredible. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, plus dozens of supporting characters and celebrity impersonations. His range is absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. But here's what's even more impressive. MacFarlane often records conversations between his own characters. That means he's essentially having entire dramatic scenes with himself, switching between voices and maintaining the emotional continuity of multiple characters simultaneously. It's like watching a one-man theater performance every time you see Peter and Brian have a heart-to-heart conversation. The other voice actors are equally talented. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, also does dozens of supporting characters, including the Griffins' maid Consuela. Mila Kunis took over the voice of Meg after the first season, and her performance evolved from simple teenager dialogue to some of the show's most emotionally complex moments. Seth Green voices Chris Griffin, and his portrayal perfectly captures that awkward teenage energy. Green actually ad-libs a lot of Chris's dialogue, particularly the character's weird sound effects and random observations. Many of Chris's funniest moments come from Green just improvising during recording sessions. The show's relationship with Fox has always been complicated and fascinating. On one hand, Family Guy makes enormous amounts of money for the network. On the other hand, it constantly creates controversy and pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable on broadcast television. There have been numerous instances where Fox executives have asked the writers to tone down certain jokes or storylines. Sometimes the writers comply, but often they find creative ways to work around the censorship. This has led to some incredibly clever wordplay and visual innuendo that's actually funnier than whatever the original joke was going to be. The international success of Family Guy is another interesting chapter in its story. The show airs in dozens of countries around the world, and each market has its own unique censorship challenges. Some countries cut entire scenes, while others dub over offensive dialogue with completely different jokes. In some markets, Stewie's sexuality is completely removed from his character arc. In others, references to religion or politics are heavily edited. This has created dozens of different versions of the show, each tailored to local sensitivities and cultural norms. Looking at Family Guy's legacy today, it's clear that the show fundamentally changed television comedy. It proved that audiences were hungry for more experimental, boundary-pushing content. It showed that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult humor, not just children's entertainment. The show also pioneered many techniques that are now standard in comedy writing. The use of pop culture references as comedic shorthand, the mixing of high and low culture, the willingness to completely abandon plot for the sake of a good joke. These are all techniques that you can see in countless comedies today. But perhaps most importantly, Family Guy proved that television shows could have multiple lives. The fact that it survived cancellation and came back stronger than ever showed other creators that there were new paths to success beyond traditional network approval. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that the show is still evolving and changing. Seth MacFarlane has stepped back from day-to-day involvement to focus on other projects, but the show continues under new leadership. Each season brings new controversies, new characters, and new ways to push the boundaries of what's possible on television. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has left an indelible mark on popular culture. It's a show that dared to be different, survived multiple attempts to kill it, and emerged as one of the most successful and influential comedies of the modern era. And honestly, that's pretty giggity if you ask me. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? And that's just scratching the surface of the absolutely wild behind-the-scenes stories that most people have never heard about this iconic show. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Today, we're exploring some absolutely mind-blowing Family Guy lore that even die-hard fans probably don't know about. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Peter Griffin the same way again. But before we jump into these crazy stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're constantly dropping content about your favorite animated series that you won't find anywhere else. And if you're a true Family Guy fan, drop a chicken fight emoji in the comments right now. Let's start with something that literally changed the course of television history. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The only reason he wasn't on that plane was because he had been out drinking the night before and overslept, missing his flight by just 15 minutes. MacFarlane has talked about this in interviews, describing how his travel agent called him frantically when she realized what had happened. Can you imagine how different the world of animation would be today if he had made that flight? No Family Guy revival, no American Dad, no The Orville. It's one of those sliding doors moments that completely altered entertainment history. Speaking of near-death experiences, did you know that Family Guy has been canceled not once, but twice? The show originally ran from 1999 to 2002 before Fox pulled the plug due to declining ratings. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The DVD sales were absolutely unprecedented for an animated series at the time. We're talking about millions of copies sold, which was unheard of for a canceled TV show. Adult Swim's late-night reruns were pulling in massive audiences, often outperforming the original Fox broadcasts. The demand became so overwhelming that Fox had no choice but to bring the show back in 2005. But the cancellation drama didn't end there. In 2007, Fox canceled the show again, this time after Season 5. Once again, fan outcry and continued strong performance in syndication forced the network's hand, and they renewed it for a 6th season. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Family Guy might be the only show in television history to be saved by its fans twice. Now, let's talk about some character secrets that will blow your mind. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. But Seth MacFarlane actually revealed in interviews that Stewie was originally conceived as a completely straight character who would eventually grow up to be a normal heterosexual adult. The gay undertones that fans picked up on were never intentionally written into the character initially. However, MacFarlane later embraced the ambiguity and has said that Stewie exists in a kind of pre-sexual state where his eventual orientation is deliberately left unclear. This explains why sometimes Stewie seems attracted to women, sometimes to men, and sometimes to neither. It's a fascinating example of how a character can evolve beyond their creator's original intentions. Here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin. He was almost killed off permanently way before that infamous Thanksgiving episode where he actually died temporarily. In the early seasons, there were multiple discussions about removing Brian from the show entirely because some writers felt his character was becoming too preachy and unlikable. The writers experimented with making Brian more flawed and hypocritical to balance out his intellectual pretensions, which is why we see him become increasingly alcoholic and self-absorbed as the series progresses. This character development wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate attempt to make him more interesting and less of a mouthpiece for liberal talking points. Let's dive into some voice acting secrets that most people don't know about. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. Seth, but he also voices dozens of minor characters throughout the series. However, there are some characters he refuses to voice himself. For example, MacFarlane has stated that he deliberately doesn't voice any of the female characters because he believes women should voice female characters whenever possible. This is why actors like Alex Borstein voice Lois and Mila Kunis voices Meg. It's a surprisingly progressive stance for a show that often gets criticized for its treatment of female characters. Speaking of Meg, here's some dark lore about America's least favorite animated teenager. The character was originally supposed to be much more popular and central to the show's dynamic. In early concept art and scripts, Meg was portrayed as a typical popular high school girl who would serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin family. However, the writers quickly discovered that it was much funnier to make her the family's scapegoat and punching bag. What started as occasional jokes about Meg being unpopular gradually evolved into the running gag where literally everyone treats her terribly. The writers have admitted that they sometimes feel bad about how mean the show is to Meg, but the jokes are just too funny to stop. Here's a piece of lore that connects to real-world tragedy. The show has made several references to Conway Twitty, the country singer, usually by cutting away to him performing full songs as a way to pad the episode runtime. These cutaway gags became a running joke about lazy writing and time filling. However, there's a darker story behind this. Conway Twitty died in 1993, years before Family Guy even existed. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that the Conway Twitty gags were actually inspired by his own father's love of the singer's music. MacFarlane's father would play Conway Twitty songs constantly when Seth was growing up, and the extended musical cutaways were a way of honoring that memory, while also poking fun at television's tendency to use musical performances as filler. Let's talk about some episodes that almost didn't make it to air. The episode titled Partial Terms of Endearment was actually banned from broadcast television entirely. The episode deals with abortion and surrogate pregnancy in typical Family Guy fashion, but the content was deemed too controversial for Fox's standards. The episode was completely finished and was supposed to air during Season 8, but Fox refused to broadcast it. It was eventually included on the DVD release and made available online, but it remains the only Family Guy episode that has never aired on television in the United States. The controversy surrounding this episode led to stricter content guidelines for the show going forward. Here's something about the show's animation that most people never notice. In the early seasons, the animation style was much more crude and simple, partly due to budget constraints, but also because of the technology available at the time. However, if you watch closely, you'll notice that the animation quality suddenly improves dramatically around Season 4. This wasn't just because of increased budget. It was because the show switched animation studios. The original episodes were animated by a small studio that specialized in low-budget television animation. When the show was revived, Fox invested in higher quality animation produced by a different studio with more advanced technology and techniques. But here's the weird part. Some fans actually prefer the cruder animation style of the early episodes. They argue that the rougher animation gave the show more character and charm. The newer episodes, while technically superior, sometimes feel too polished and corporate compared to the scrappy early seasons. Let's explore some celebrity connections that might surprise you. Patrick Stewart, who voices baby Susie Swanson, actually improvises most of his lines. The writers typically give him a basic outline of what the character needs to say, but Stewart adds his own Shakespearean flair to every line reading. Stewart has said in interviews that voicing a baby character allows him to explore comedy in ways that his serious dramatic roles don't permit. He's also revealed that he often comes up with the most outrageous and inappropriate lines for baby Susie, pushing the boundaries of what the censors will allow. Here's some lore about the show's most controversial episodes. The episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault together for the entire episode was actually written as a bottle episode to save money on animation and voice acting. However, it ended up becoming one of the most critically acclaimed episodes in the show's history. The writers have revealed that they were initially worried the episode would be boring since it only featured 2 characters in one location for the entire runtime. But the episode's success proved that the show worked best when it focused on character development and dialogue rather than just rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags. Speaking of experimental episodes, did you know that the show has done several episodes that exist in alternate universes or different time periods? These aren't just random creative choices. They're actually part of a larger multiverse concept that the writers have been quietly building throughout the series. The writers have hinted that all of these alternate reality episodes are connected, and that there's a larger mythology about parallel dimensions that runs throughout the show. Most fans don't pick up on these connections because they're subtle and spread across multiple seasons, but dedicated viewers have started mapping out the multiverse timeline. Here's something about the show's music that most people don't realize. Seth MacFarlane is actually a trained singer and musician who has released several albums of standards and jazz music. Many of the musical numbers in Family Guy feature MacFarlane's actual singing voice, not just his character voices. MacFarlane has said that he uses Family Guy as a way to showcase different musical styles and pay homage to classic American songwriting. Some of the show's most elaborate musical sequences were specifically designed to highlight MacFarlane's vocal abilities and his love of traditional pop music. But here's the interesting part. MacFarlane has also revealed that he sometimes writes entire episodes around songs he wants to perform. The plot becomes secondary to the musical numbers, which explains why some episodes feel like they're structured more like variety shows than traditional sitcoms. Let's talk about some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans don't know about. There have been several major conflicts between the voice actors over the years, particularly regarding salary negotiations and creative control. The most significant dispute involved Mila Kunis, who voices Meg. During Season 7, there were reports that Kunis was considering leaving the show due to disagreements about her character's treatment and her compensation compared to other cast members. The situation was eventually resolved, but it led to changes in how Meg was written in subsequent seasons. Here's some dark lore about the show's influence on real-world events. Several episodes of Family Guy have been accused of predicting or inspiring real-world tragedies. The most notable example is an Innuendo episode that aired before the Boston Marathon bombing that featured Peter accidentally detonating bombs in Boston. The episode was pulled from reruns and streaming services after the bombing, and some conspiracy theorists claimed that the show somehow predicted the attack. Seth MacFarlane has addressed these claims, explaining that they're purely coincidental and that the show's writers don't have any special knowledge of future events. However, this incident led to increased scrutiny of the show's content and more careful consideration of how certain jokes and storylines might be interpreted in different contexts. Here's something about the show's international versions that might surprise you. Family Guy has been adapted for television in several different countries, and each version makes significant changes to accommodate local culture and censorship standards. The most interesting adaptation is probably the Arabic version, which removes all alcohol references, changes Brian from a dog to a cat, and significantly tones down the sexual humor. These changes are so extensive that the show becomes almost unrecognizable compared to the American version. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's clear that there's so much more to this show than meets the eye. From near-death experiences that changed television history to hidden multiverses and banned episodes, Family Guy has one of the richest and most complex backstories in animated television. These behind-the-scenes stories remind us that even our favorite comedies have real human drama and complexity behind them. The next time you watch Family Guy, you'll hopefully have a new appreciation for all the creative decisions, controversies, and coincidences that shape the show we know today. If you enjoyed learning about these hidden Family Guy secrets, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. What other animated series would you like us to explore next? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we uncover even more secrets from the world of animation. Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And when it came back from the grave, it changed television forever in ways you probably never realized? Stick around, because what I'm about to tell you about the hidden depths of Family Guy will completely change how you see this seemingly simple cartoon. Most people think Family Guy is just random jokes and cutaway gags. But there's a secret layer of storytelling, hidden references, and behind-the-scenes drama that would make your head spin. From secret government conspiracies to real-world tragedies that shaped entire episodes, this show has more dark secrets than you might imagine. Let's start with something that sounds like a conspiracy theory but is absolutely true. Family Guy predicted major world events with scary accuracy. And I'm not talking about lucky guesses. We're talking about specific details that aired months or even years before they actually happened in real life. Remember the episode where Peter accidentally damages a bridge? That episode aired in 2005, showing a bridge collapse in remarkable detail. Less than 2 years later, the Minneapolis bridge collapse happened in almost identical circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. The show also depicted airport security scenarios that became reality after major policy changes. Episodes showing specific security procedures aired before those exact procedures were implemented in real airports. Either Seth MacFarlane is a time traveler, or the writers were paying very close attention to patterns most people missed. But here's where it gets really weird. The show once depicted a very specific type of terrorist attack involving planes, and this aired before certain real-world events that I can't get too detailed about without this video getting demonetized. The point is, Family Guy wasn't just making random jokes about current events. They were somehow tapping into the collective unconscious of what was coming next. Now let's talk about the show's death and resurrection, because this story is wilder than any episode plot. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought it was done forever, but here's what they didn't expect. The DVD sales went absolutely insane. People were buying Family Guy DVDs like crazy, and more importantly, Adult Swim started running reruns that pulled in massive ratings. Fox realized they had made a huge mistake. The show wasn't just popular. It was building a cult following that was growing stronger every day it was off the air. When Family Guy came back in 2005, something had fundamentally changed. The writers knew they had been given a second chance, and they went absolutely wild with it. The humor got darker, The references got more obscure, and they started breaking the fourth wall in ways that no animated show had ever done before. But here's the part that most fans don't know. The cancellation and resurrection created a split personality within the show itself. There's pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy, and they're almost like two different shows entirely. Pre-cancellation Family Guy was more grounded. Sure, it was weird, but the characters felt like real people with real problems. Post-cancellation Family Guy became something else entirely. It became a commentary on television itself, a show that was constantly aware it was a show. This shift created what television historians now call the meta-revolution. Family Guy showed other animated shows that you could break every rule, reference your own existence, and make fun of the very network that pays you and still be successful. South Park, Rick and Morty, and countless other shows followed this blueprint. Speaking of breaking rules, let's talk about the episodes that almost didn't make it to air. There's a whole vault of Family Guy content that was deemed too controversial, too dark, or too legally problematic to broadcast. Some of these episodes have become legendary among fans who have never seen them. One infamous episode dealt with a real-world tragedy in such a specific way that it would have caused massive backlash. The episode was fully animated, voiced, and scored, but it was pulled at the last minute. Only a handful of people have ever seen it, and they're bound by non-disclosure agreements. Another banned episode featured a storyline that involved real political figures in scenarios that would have caused international incidents. The legal department shut it down so hard that even mentioning specific details could result in lawsuits. But here's what's fascinating about these banned episodes. They show just how far Seth MacFarlane and his team were willing to push boundaries. They weren't just making a cartoon. They were conducting social experiments to see what society would tolerate. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore: the show's relationship with censorship and standards. Every episode that makes it to air represents hundreds of battles fought behind the scenes between the writers and network executives. The writers developed an elaborate system for getting controversial content past the censors. They would intentionally include material they knew would be rejected, so that when they fought to keep the stuff they really wanted, it would seem reasonable by comparison. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. This strategy works so well that other shows started copying it. The Family Guy approach to dealing with censorship became the industry standard for pushing boundaries on television. Now let's dive into the character origins, because the backstories of these characters are way darker and more complex than you'd expect from a comedy show. Peter Griffin wasn't always the lovable idiot we know today. In early concept art and scripts, he was genuinely disturbing, almost psychopathic in his behavior. The writers had to gradually soften Peter's character because test audiences found him genuinely unlikable. But traces of that original darker Peter still show up in certain episodes, creating this weird cognitive dissonance where you're laughing at someone who, if you really think about it, should probably be in prison. Stewie's character evolution is even more interesting. He was originally conceived as a pure villain, a baby bent on world domination with no redeeming qualities. But as the show progressed, the writers started exploring what would make a baby want to destroy everything, and they discovered something profound about childhood trauma and family dynamics. The gradual softening of Stewie from villain to complex character represents one of the most sophisticated character development arcs in television comedy. But it happened so slowly that most viewers didn't even notice it was happening. Brian's character might be the most tragic of all. He represents the writer's own struggles with depression, alcoholism, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that doesn't match your dreams. Every time Brian has an existential crisis, it's the writers working through their own psychological issues on screen. This is why Brian's temporary death hit fans so hard. It wasn't just killing off a character, it was the writers symbolically killing off the part of themselves that they saw in Brian. When they brought him back, it represented their own decision to keep fighting through depression and creative frustration. The show's relationship with its own success is another layer of complexity that most fans miss. Family Guy became so popular that it started influencing real-world culture, but this success created a feedback loop that began changing the show itself. References to Family Guy started showing up in other TV shows, movies, and even news broadcasts. Politicians started making Family Guy references in speeches. The show went from commenting on culture to actually shaping culture, and this shift is reflected in the later seasons. The writers became increasingly aware that they were creating cultural touchstones, and this awareness changed how they approached comedy. Jokes that might have been throwaway gags in early seasons became carefully crafted cultural commentary in later seasons. This evolution created what media scholars call the recursive effect, where a piece of media becomes so influential that it starts commenting on its own influence. Family Guy didn't just break the fourth wall. It demolished the entire theater. Let's talk about the real-world consequences of Family Guy's cultural impact. The show has been credited with changing how people communicate, particularly in how they use pop culture references in everyday conversation. Before Family Guy, pop culture references in conversation were usually recent and obvious. After Family Guy, people started making increasingly obscure references, creating entire conversations that were essentially elaborate chains of cultural callbacks. This changed how humor works in social situations. The show also influenced how other media uses cutaway gags and non sequiturs. Everything from commercials to political campaigns started using Family Guy-style random humor to grab attention and create memorable moments. But perhaps the most significant impact was on censorship standards across all media. Family Guy pushed boundaries so consistently and successfully that it expanded what was considered acceptable on television. Shows that came after could go places that wouldn't have been possible before Family Guy paved the way. The voice acting in Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because there are layers of performance art happening that most people completely miss. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice multiple characters. He creates distinct psychological profiles for each voice that reflect different aspects of his own personality. Peter represents 10. MacFarlane's id, his impulse-driven, consequence-ignoring side. Brian represents his superego, his intellectual, morally concerned side. Stewie represents his ego, his ambitious, attention-seeking side. The show is essentially one person having a conversation with different aspects of himself. This psychological complexity extends to the guest voices as well. When celebrities appear on Family Guy, they're not just doing celebrity cameos. They're being integrated into this complex psychological ecosystem that MacFarlane has created. The show's approach to celebrity culture is particularly sophisticated. Rather than just making fun of celebrities, Family Guy examines the psychological impact of fame on both celebrities and the people who consume celebrity culture. This brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy: its commentary on media consumption itself. The show constantly references other TV shows, movies, and cultural phenomena, but it's not just making references for the sake of references. Each reference serves as a commentary on how media shapes our understanding of reality. When Peter acts out scenes from movies, he's demonstrating how deeply fictional narratives penetrate real human behavior. When the show parodies other TV shows, it's examining how different formats and styles influence how we process information. The cutaway gags aren't random interruptions. They're demonstrations of how the human mind actually works. We don't think in linear narratives. We think in associations, tangents, and random connections. Family Guy mirrors the actual structure of human consciousness. This psychological accuracy is why the show resonates so deeply with audiences. It's not just funny, it's cognitively familiar. The chaos of Family Guy matches the chaos of our own internal mental experience. The show's treatment of social issues is another area where there's more depth than meets the eye. While Family Guy often appears to make jokes at the expense of sensitive topics, careful analysis reveals a more complex approach to social commentary. The show uses humor to make serious points more palatable, but it also uses humor to expose the absurdity of certain social attitudes. When characters make prejudiced statements, they're usually portrayed as idiotic or ignorant, effectively undermining the attitudes they're expressing. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics without preaching, but it also creates ambiguity about what the show actually believes. This ambiguity is intentional. forcing viewers to think critically about the issues being presented rather than passively accepting predetermined conclusions. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth considering what this all means for the future of comedy in television. Family Guy didn't just entertain audiences, it fundamentally changed what television could be and do. The show proved that audiences were hungry for more complex, self-aware entertainment that challenged traditional narrative structures. It demonstrated that comedy could be a vehicle for serious psychological and social exploration without losing its entertainment value. Most importantly, Family Guy showed that taking creative risks, even when they result in cancellation, can ultimately lead to greater success than playing it safe. The show's death and resurrection became a template for how creative properties can find new life through changing audience behaviors and consumption patterns. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're watching a sophisticated piece of media art that changed television forever, influenced how we communicate with each other, and continues to push boundaries in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. The real genius of Family Guy isn't in any single joke or episode. It's in how it managed to hide all this complexity behind what appears to be simple, silly humor. That's the ultimate magic trick, and it's still working after all these years.